Good evening. Welcome to tonight's special City Council meeting, Thursday, May 21st, 2026. Reviewing the budget agenda. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Clark?
Here.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Here.
Councilmember Westman?
Here.
Councilmember Jensen?
Here.
Mayor Morgan?
Here. Would you all join in the Pledge of Allegiance? Do we have any additions or deletions?
Staff has no changes to the agenda this evening.
Great. Or additional materials?
Staff does distribute additional materials for tonight's meeting. There were 4 emails related to item 5A and 1 email related to item 5C.
Great. We'll open it up to oral communications by members of the public. If you wish to speak on anything that is not on tonight's itemized agenda, feel free. But I see no takers. All right. Moving on to our general government. 5A this evening, presentation of our fiscal year 26-27. Jim's back with us again. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is, as you just said, our second budget hearing to review the operating budget and then an overview of the capital improvement program. So tonight we'll review the budget process. I'll go over the updates and edits that we've made since the first draft. Director Khan will give an overview of the capital improvement program, and then City Manager Goldstein and I will go over each of those follow-up items with individual slides following the CIP overview. So as far as process, the first draft budget was published on April 17th, reviewed by the FAC May 5th, and then by the Council May 6th. We are at the May 21st hearing for a follow-up from that May 6th meeting. Excuse me. And then as far as next steps, it'll be June 11th, receive FAC recommendations if they have any, and the final deadline to adopt the budget during this fiscal year would be June 25th. So as far as a summary, estimated fund balance for June 30th, 2027 is now at 94, just under 95,000. I'll go over how we get there in just a second. This is just kind of same information from last time. Cruz contingency reserve at 1.8 million. UAL did go down from 35 million to 34. However, our annual payment increased from 2.9 million to 3.3. We do rely heavily on sales tax and TOT. I'll show that a little bit on our long-term model. And then our reserves remain below target balances. We're still waiting for 2023 storm damage reimbursements. So this is our multi-year projection. This is the same thing that you've seen for about the last 9 or 10 years as far as the revenue assumptions and then the revenue expenditures on the bottom and the impact to the fund balance, or net impact to the fund balance. That is unchanged from the first budget hearing other than the numbers that we'll go over, but as far as the assumptions themselves, they're the same. This is the expenditure side. We haven't historically shown this side of the assumptions, but this is the assumptions that we use for each of the main expenditure categories along the top there. You'll see where we cut training and memberships this year by 32%, restoring them 26.7 next year. There's a big jump there, but everything else is kind of based on trends. You'll see on the bottom of that first box, the CalPERS UAL amount. Those amounts come directly from the actuarial reports that we receive each year from CalPERS. Below that's the annual change from year to year and that percentage change. And then the bottom box is the same as the previous slide. So this, again, sales tax is about 50% of our general fund revenue. So if we changed our assumption going forward from a 2.5% sales tax to 3.5%, you can see that on the previous slide, we were balanced in fiscal year 27-28. We were slightly under in 29, and then it started going negative after that. This 1% change, we're balanced now for 4 years, really 5, 49,000 in 2020 and 2031, and then it goes negative. If that goes the other way, a 1% reduction from the assumption that we're currently using, then you'll see 27, 28 is still okay, and then it gets really ugly really fast with that change in the sales tax assumption. So this is just kind of a demonstration of the model that we have behind. This is like what I call the dashboard page. Behind this is all of our revenues, all of our expenditures. We run it out 10 years, but this is kind of where we keep our focus. So this is the fiscal model. This particular version of it has been around for about 9 or 10 years. We had one before that that was going back to, I want to say, around 2010. This is updated general fund summary. So you'll see the budget is balanced. I think the first draft, we were about $8,200 upside down, but we had a higher fund balance. I'll get to that in a second. And then the estimated ending fund balance is just about $95,000 in 27 and just under $400,000 next fiscal year. So changes since our May 6th meeting. Community television, we moved, those first two are out of the city council budget. So the community television, we moved out of general fund, and we're going to be paying those out of a special revenue fund. The city council also directed us to reduce their budget by $9,000, leaving $2,000 for each of the new 3 council members from this upcoming election. In personnel, we moved the healthcare premiums that we pay for retirees out of the general fund, and we're going to be paying that from our OPEB trust. And we also eliminated the $60,000 contribution to the OPEB trust, as it now has a $1 million balance, and its interest earnings are pretty much covering the healthcare premiums that we pay. At council's direction, FAC recommendation, we added $20,000 into the admin services budget for software for fiscal transparency to improve public access. In the PD budget, we received a revised budget from the Emergency Communications Center, reducing $54,000 out of those costs that we pay there. That identified funding and the direction of council allowed us to put back in the MSO position that was not included in the first draft. That's $94,624. And then we had mentioned that we inadvertently left off the economic development amount, so that's also been added back in. And then the equipment ISF was more of just a cleanup. We have $100,000 being transferred from the general fund into the ISF, and then $100,000 getting charged to PD through ISF charges to fund a patrol vehicle and the GEM car. So net impact from those changes increased fund balances by $64,915. But you'll notice that our fund balance that I'm estimating now is about $30,000 lower than it was in the first draft. And that's because we've trued up our estimates. On the expenditure side, it went up about $95,000 from the first round. We did get our sales tax number yesterday, and we are tracking on budget. We're slightly above, but we'll call it on budget. So that was good news that we didn't need to ratchet any of those estimates down. So again, estimated ending fund balance of just under $95,000 is well below our historical target of $500,000. Again, the FAC did meet May 5th and reviewed the first draft. They didn't make any recommendations at that time. We do have a FAC meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. They're going to review the same changes we discussed tonight. I'll update them on the sales tax and year-end estimates, and then a brief CIP overview. And then recommendations, if any, can be presented to City Council at either the June 11th or June 25th meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions before we move on to CIP.
On the sales tax, you said you thought it tracking about where it was. Last time you reported it was slightly under, is that correct?
The first quarter was a little low. The second quarter was high. And so we were on budget after 2 quarters, and now we stayed on budget.
So we're on, it's not on budget for this quarter, it's on budget for the
full year.
Okay.
Correct.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Jim? Okay.
Yeah, I had a question for Jim. We've heard some concerns from people in the public about Measure Y. Just wondered if, moving forward, if we could do a better job of painting the picture of what we've done and where the money's gone on a dashboard.
I have some slides towards the end of the
Excellent.
presentation on
Thank you.
Measure Y.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council members. I am pleased to present to you the fiscal year 26 through 31, which will come up on us very quickly, capital improvements program for the city of Capitola. Just real quickly, this week is National Public Works Week. This morning, we were able to close the lagoon so we can have our nice beach for the summer. So I'm very proud. My entire crew was out there raking kelp earlier this week. And so if you see them, give them a smile, give them a wave. All right, so what is a capital improvements program? So it identifies our major infrastructure, and any capital project here, our threshold is $50,000 or more, and it's over a 5-year period. So it really tracks from the beginning, from like the conceptual, a little after the conceptual phase with the planning phase, all the way through construction of a facility. And they're generally grouped in transportation, parks, public spaces, public facilities, and here in Capitola for coastal resiliency. Our CIP includes both active projects, so projects we're currently active and working on, and then also like long-term capital projects. So for our funding strategy, I know this text is a little small, but the point is that we rely heavily on external funding for our very large capital projects, things like our wharf, our community center, our playground. Those have all been heavily supported by funds outside of general funds in the city of Capitola. Those kind of funds are federal and state grants, which are competitive. Formula funds from things like SB1, the gas tax, or Measure D formula funds. Also grants administered by the RTC, federal grants like CDBG, which are restricted to low and low-income communities, and then using our local match funds to receive those grants and partnerships like we have with the County Park Friends for the playground. Tracking all of these funds have a lot of considerations, just keeping us competitive, having a match for these programs, and really being ready when these programs come around to be competitive when funds into our projects. General challenges and capital delivery. Big one is funding availability, but also regulatory requirements. Many of our projects, particularly our coastal projects, require quite a bit of permitting. Construction costs obviously have been very volatile the last few years. Coordination and staffing. Oftentimes we need to get outside consultants to do some of our construction management, for example. Like we don't have the kind of staff where we can be out at a project every day typically. And then just really being, again, available for opportunities when partnerships or grants or other type of funding comes up. Okay, so we're going to go over every single project in the CIP. I'm going to talk relatively quickly. Feel free to ask me any questions about any of the projects at the end. Generally, they are grouped into completed and near completed projects, active and funding projects, so projects where we have full funding to get to some kind of deliverable. Planning projects are things that are partially funded where we know we're going to need to find more funding in the short term to continue those projects. And then those that are completely unfunded or conceptual projects, things that were prior council goals or things that staff has identified that are going to be nearer term projects for the city. So for our completed projects, the first one we have is our Park at Risk Mansion, restoring a historic site and creating a brand new park facility. This one is totally complete, open to the public. We had a celebration at the library a few weeks ago. Overall, there was a $1.1 million investment in this property. And the next steps for this property and this facility is really moving forward with fundraising with Capitola Cares for some of those amenities that we weren't able to complete with this project, the pay for fundraising that the city is going to launch, and then long-term maintenance of this new facility, which is supported by Measure Q and some of the staff we were able to hire. Another project that is very near completion is our Treasure Cove Playground that replaced our playground from the 90s. Is also very near completion. We have a grand opening scheduled for the morning of June 17th, and that is approximately a $3.5 million project supported by that CDBG, which is federal funds, and then also the community fundraising with the County Park Friends. Adjacent to that is our community center. Our staff moved in last week, or beginning of this week. That is also substantially complete. There's a few punch list items left to go on that project. That with the patios, so all of that outside space was about a $7.3 million project. Again, we're going to celebrate that with our grand opening on June 17th. The 41st Avenue Multimodal Project, we awarded a contract here in council a few months ago. That's going to be getting ready to go in the next few weeks. It's about a $2.3 million project that was grant supported by one of the RTC RTEB funding opportunities and also with our gas tax funds. So that, again, is going to be night work. We are going to be reaching out to those affected properties shortly and really doing our project coordination work with the other regional projects in the county. So we're going to move on to projects not currently under construction. So some active projects we have going on. We have the Stockton Bridge alternatives. We're going to be coming back to council sometime this summer with a updated scope based on council direction to look at alternatives for the long-term reliability and addressing some of the current bridge conditions for this facility. The funding we have right now is about $850,000 supported by a grant from the Water Board, and then also general fund support that was allocated to this project several fiscal years ago. Esplanade Park is a project we also received a grant for here recently from the Coastal Conservancy. The packet you had with the full CIP document had some summary tables that missed the general fund allocation for this project, so that will be updated. There's also $50,000 in general fund for this project that is not anticipated to be spent this fiscal year. All of the project work we have currently is supported by the grant. And that public outreach will also be starting this summer, looking at improving the park and then also improving its resiliency. The pavement management program is an ongoing project. We have a 5-year cycle where we do a pavement management plan. That's like we are going to do that evaluation in that full 5-year cycle again, not this coming fiscal year, but the following fiscal year, in 26, 27. That plan lays out all of the roads we want to do in a 5-year period based on a number of things, and you get to hear that long explanation at a future council meeting. But on May 28th, so next week, we will be proposing our streets for fiscal year 26, 27 for either summer work or for spring 27 work because we don't do road work in the winter. So next, we have a set of partially funded projects. So the first one is a biggie, is our Cliff Drive Resiliency Project. This is the one that needs to be brought into phases. So phase 1 is the most critically deteriorating part of the bluff. The budget for this is about $12 million. It's supported by the FHWA emergency funding, which is tied to the 22-23 storm. So it's on a timeline based on when that funding was awarded. Also has grant support from the Coastal Commission. We'll also need additional funding to do the match for the federal grant. So that's about $1 million. Staff has applied for several grants for this funding. Have not heard back on a number of them. A lot of them are based on the state budget. Sidewalk Infill Program is a program that has about $1.5 million worth of identified need of sidewalk gaps throughout the city. Both that are completely undeveloped and also converting ones that are like DG to a standard ADA concrete sidewalk. We did receive a grant for less than what we asked for from the RTC to do a sidewalk gap project this fiscal year. A following agenda item addresses how we might utilize that funding. The Bay Avenue Corridor project we talked about just last meeting. So we obviously had the pilot project removed and the new concepts are in development to come back to council to discuss at a later date. There is about $750,000 left in that budget based on an RTC grant we currently hold and a federal earmark. The Monterey Park Play Area was a council goal from last fiscal year. We currently have a public survey out that's received about 100 responses. Staff plans on coming back later this summer with the results of some of that initial outreach and seeking council recommendation as how to move forward. There's approximately $10,000 from last year's budget for this project. Grand Avenue, we had discussed a few meetings back as well. The prior pathway concept has been paused and we're shifting to potential overlooks in the area. There's about $31,000 put towards that project in this current fiscal year. After the work completed by the landscape architect, there's approximately $12,000, I want to say, left in that budget that has not been expended. All right, then we have our conceptual projects. So that's the remainder of Cliff Drive. In total, that project in addition to the 12 million for phase one, is approximately $33 million, so $45 million for the entire stretch. That would also, we are also seeking grant funding for. We have a couple outstanding larger grants to look into building more than phase one of this project. The planning and the permitting that we are currently working on phase one would also cover the planning and permitting for the larger project. Noble Gulch Dog Park was a council priority a few fiscal years ago. It is still has a placeholder in the CIP. There's currently no funding put towards this project. The estimated improvement to convert the rear of this park to a dog park is about $75,000, so there was some drainage needs that needed to be further investigated. The corporation yard, so we are required to move towards EV vehicles for all non-police vehicles by a certain date, according to the Air Board. That date does keep on shifting, but it is out there. PG&E has programs where they will upgrade your service for free, but you have to do the service from the service line throughout your yard and to put in the chargers. There are grants available for this kind of thing. So the net for this project to the city's general fund is very potentially zero. So staff intends on applying for a grant to do the infrastructure on the city's courtyard site. And then we are partway through the PG&E coordination of them upgrading their service to the courtyard. And with that, those are all of the established projects that we had in our CIP. There are some emerging capital needs that do not have any budget put towards them or even estimated towards them right now because they're very much in their infancy. And I'll really need a real condition assessment to determine what the value of these projects would be. But we do have our Perry Park Bridge that had some emergency work done on it a few years ago that will likely need more repair in the future. Our aging facilities with the City Hall and the corporate building in general. Noble Gulch, which is something that is coordinated with Zone 5, and they have a master planning document that we're working on together to determine how to best address that in the future. And then our wharf facilities, you all just approved a master plan, and there's an RFP out there, and there's likely a city project associated with that in the future. We have a few future funding opportunities that we're looking forward to here. One of them being CDBG. There's up to $5 million in this this coming cycle. We anticipate to be in the fall. You really need a shovel-ready project for this kind of grant. So the eligible types are parks and recreation, transportation projects, community facilities such as our community center, and then also things like drainage and other utility improvements. I believe you all seen this map before. The yeses indicate where we would be potentially able to do a project. Future CDBG projects that staff has identified could include things such as Bay Avenue, Monterey Park, additional improvements at Jade Street, and a neighborhood project such as Cliffwood Heights, somewhere that has very poor pavement, needs sidewalk gap improvements, ADA accessibility issues. We do have to do a public hearing process for CDBG, which we will be doing this summer. The other funding opportunity that we have an eye on is Safe Streets for All. This is a federal program linked to our local road safety plan. All these any project in that grant application has to be safety forward. This is a page from our local road safety plan that you adopted last meeting. Anywhere we see a yellow line or dot would be an eligible location to do a project. So, looking ahead, we have a lot of projects underway, a lot of projects coming in our future. Really, grant readiness and looking for partnerships is really critical to getting these projects done in a city of our size. And it really requires flexibility and timing, which we'll go into in other items on this agenda today. I am able to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you so much. Start, any questions?
I just have two quick questions. I know that the Perry Park Bridge is in the future, but you listed it as doing, repairs to the actual bridge. And I wondered if we could make certain if we could add some lighting to that project, because we received comments from people now that the Rispin is open that they're using that bridge a lot more. And I know it's in an environmentally sensitive habitat, so it'll have to be something soft and lovely, but we could add that. And could you just go over the Cliff Drive numbers one more time? So the way I understood what you said was that for the first phase, which is the most important one to do, that's $12 million.
12 or 12 and a half, but yes.
And then to do the rest of the project, it's $33 million.
That is our estimate at this time, yes.
Okay. There seems to be out there in the community this number of like $80 million to do the whole thing that I think came out of a community meeting that you had on the project. Where did the $80 million come from?
So we've done a few estimates of this project over time, and a lot of it's going to be means and methods and permitting availability. At the time of, I would guess that was our latest public meeting, which was about a little over a year ago. At this point, we thought that we would have to do a different method. There's like an over or an under method. Under would be really difficult to permit. Turns out not impossible to permit, which would be a lot cheaper. So from what we understand from the permitting that we would be allowed, the methods we'd be allowed to do, that is our current estimate. But previously using other methods, we thought it was a higher estimate.
Because $33 million is a lot better than $80 million. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So on the cliff, where are we in the, can you give us just an update? Have we submitted anything yet? Or that, I know, what's the final, like, are we at a final design? And are we submitting for permits, or where are we with that?
So to receive the money from the FHWA, you have to apply for it and they earmark it for you, and then you have to do your NEPA or your environmental review, and then you apply for the money, you get in the queue for the money, and then they eventually allocate you the actual funds. We have not yet requested the funding. We are still in our environmental review. We were at the end of our environmental review, and then Caltrans decided to start our cultural resources item over. So actually the next few weeks, you will be seeing someone on the side of the cliff looking for cultural resources. Once that process is over, we will be able to request the funds from FHWA, which I assume will be in the fall, but Caltrans is overseeing that part of this. And so that is on their timeline.
So, help me out, and I appreciate that. Where does like coastal fall in then? Like, does it go to Coastal Commission?
So we've been talking to them for the past 2 years on this project. For the initial piece of the project, we'd be getting a short-term permit, which the staff can issue. And then for the larger permit, we'd be doing the full coastal development permit going to their board. That is not something that we need for the phase 1 project.
Perfect, all right. And then my next question, I guess, is going to go to the city manager, but maybe can we have, I know we asked the city attorney to talk about District 5 and the responsibility. I see that's on the CIP list now about the drainage and stuff like that. Maybe he can just give us an update on that to see where he is in that review.
Sure. So the question is about Zone 5 Flood Control District, and there's been dispute about the ownership, particularly of the Noble Gulch Culvert, which we called out as an emerging need or potential need. For those of you longtime fans, been paying attention to the city for a long time, you may recall that about almost 5 years ago, we entered into an agreement with Zone 5 to basically not point the finger at each other about who owns what just because somebody studied it or applied for funds to try to fix it. Essentially to cooperate to try to prevent flooding and prevent future problems. So along those lines, Zone 5 completed a Zone 5 master plan. They've come up with an overall cost and different options to kind of fix the entire pipe. So we, in this document, have included sort of a placeholder, if you will, to try to seek funds if we are able to try to fix the pipe. The most pressing need, there's two pressing needs. One is at the outflow, and then the other one is the corrugated metal pipe underneath the lower lot. About a third of that was replaced in 2011 with a concrete pipe. the remaining CMP is probably, I want to say, 60 plus years old at this point. And as you know, the steel doesn't last forever. We've poured a concrete bottom on it maybe 8 or 9 years ago, but that is going to need attention. So we wanted to call attention to it, so that if we were able to obtain funding, it was something we could just fix if necessary.
But at the same time, we're going to be looking to see who's ultimately responsible for it. At the same time, we're looking for funding. Is that correct?
At the end of the day, I think that determining ultimate responsibility probably would require litigation. Our position is that these are Zone 5's responsibilities. Their position is that it's the city's. We sort of have a ceasefire agreement, if you will, to try to resolve it and just fix the problems. We've talked to our city attorney, and they're obviously doing work in that regard. But yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give.
Okay, thank you. And so, first of all, Jessica, thanks for the CIP. I think it's awesome and it's amazing. So, one of the questions I had with the CIPs I looked at in the past is sometimes government agencies put in like placeholders, and I know it drives the CIP number up and it starts to look exaggerated and stuff. And I was wondering what the council thought, and then what city staff thought by putting in some placeholder numbers for those. I know it helps in the future when you try to go out and talk to the community about what your overall needs are. So like I see that you plugged in the money for the payment management plan for 5 years, but like, what is the overall payment needs for the city? 50 million or whatever the number is. Also, like an estimate in there for what City Hall might cost. And even though they're very much a placeholder number, I think they start to really tell the story to our community, like what their overall needs are. I know also the ones I've been involved with, like we went through like the fields, like the irrigation systems in the fields that are 50 years old, and they're going to start costing the city a lot more money to maintain and have those things. And I just wanted to see what you and the city manager thought about, and also council thought about having this document. I'm not saying right now, but this document for the next year, that it starts to incorporate some of those numbers. So it's more of an accurate document on where we are with the infrastructure that's aging.
I would say it would vary per project, and some of them you need to make baseline assumptions. So for example, City Hall, the number to renovate this versus moving, right, and building a new facility would be very different. So if there's an understanding of what some of those baseline assumptions are, then we can add those things. I think it's just important to make very clear kind of what your assumption is for Monterey Park. Is the assumption that we're going to redo the whole park, or is the assumption that we're going to put in a small playground? So I think, yes, yeah, please.
I think I've seen CIPs both ways. Some that include sort of estimates, kind of like pie in the sky, like, oh, we want to do a new city hall that's $40 million, and it's a number. And then other ones that are more sort of taking a methodical approach. And I think this took a more methodical approach because it's the first time we're bringing it out. I think if the council is interested in seeing kind of, give us a big number and put an asterisk next to it when it's, pie in the sky. And then we can kind of be able to sort of maybe start to bracket kind of our long-term needs. I think that's fine as well. It's just, I want to make sure that if we were to do that, we're all operating under the same assumption, and, then people aren't sort of, questioning what it is exactly we're putting dollars in for when we haven't fully described it yet.
And I think like some of those might be like that, but if you take like paving, I think in the CIP it has an overall large number. And I think it's important when we talk about, I look at one day there's going to probably be a need to ask the community again for support. And the more we can talk about our, when it talks about we need to spend $2.2 million a year for every year, or spend $50 million for roads, to have that number talked about a long process, so everybody's not a shock factor of what the needs are. And that's just where I was trying to get to. So I'm interested in what everything is the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, because the PMP is a number that we have every year, every 5 years we do this, we do generate a what would it take to maintain the PMP where it is, what would it take to redo all the streets. So those are numbers where we do have a more tangible thing that we can attribute.
That's all I had right now.
Questions?
A question about Noble Gulch Park. Is that a shovel-ready project?
As designed, the last time we talked about it, we had done a kind of a conceptual design, which included fencing, kind of grading out for dog park, having separate areas, putting in some plumbing. So staff has done a fairly close estimate. I don't think that's a project we necessarily need to design unless, like, have a professional design for, unless there is a desire to have more of a substantial park. So I would consider that shovel ready.
Looking at the map, it looks like it's in one of the areas where we could get funding.
Yes, I believe so.
And then another question to go along with it, the Zone 5, all the stuff they're going to do to Noble Gulch, would that be eligible for any of the funding? Even though we're going to be working with the county trying to get some of this done. But
There's definitely funding out there for projects, flood control projects. Yes, that is something definitely FEMA puts out fairly often. CDBG, it would be, but I'm not, it has to service particularly that neighborhood. And usually the Zone 5 projects are more of a regional project.
thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Director Khan. It's great to see the overview of all the projects and the different stages we're in. You mentioned, going back to the Grand Ave project, you mentioned there's $12,000 left that has not been expended. Do we get to, I mean, since we're not moving forward with additional work, do we get to reallocate that funding to another project? Or put it back in the general fund?
Yeah, as of right now, it's still sitting in the CIP fund, but unallocated, if that project's complete.
Okay, I mean, I'd like to see that leverage for a local match or more grant funding applications. Thank you. I had a couple questions. Going back to Cliff Drive, you had mentioned that there was like a timeline tied to the funding that we've already received, or maybe I misheard.
Correct. So you have to request the funds within a certain timeline that Caltrans puts out there. We've passed that initial phase, but since it was Caltrans' fault that we're still doing this, they extended it voluntarily. So right now, I believe the deadline is in September to request the funds.
Okay, so would you say that we're at risk for losing that, or? No.
Not more than any other federal project.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then going back to the EV fleet for the courtyard, so would we be responsible for purchasing the vehicles, right?
Yes.
But PG&E would be helping us with the electricity and not the stations, the charging stations?
So there's a few pieces to this. So you have to, so they upgrade the service free of charge. We commit to doing the infrastructure on our site. That's already been designed. That was done through funding through 3CE a few years ago. So it's fully designed, and then we have to pay for that infrastructure, which there's grant opportunities with the Air Board for.
Right.
And then the chargers actually have already been purchased. They were purchased through a grant that we received from the Air Board a few years ago in anticipation of this, and then also chargers at the community center, and chargers are here. And then we have to commit to purchasing so many EV vehicles a year, which is something the state has made us commit to anyway.
Okay, and then would you think that there might be grant opportunity for the purchasing of the vehicles, or not necessarily?
There's generally rebates. Historically, there's been rebates, so they have not covered the full cost, but they have often covered the delta between like a gas vehicle and an EV vehicle.
And then I know it's on the list of like pie in the sky hopes of redoing the courtyard. If we install these the chargers and everything, is that still a project that could work around what we do now? And then, okay, just forward thinking. Okay, cool. I think that's all my questions. Yeah.
Back
What's next?
All right, so I'm going to pick up for a little bit, and then Jim and I are going to bounce back and forth as we go through this. So the next thing we're going to talk about is following up on the items from the first budget hearing. The things we're going to talk about is reserves, one-time revenue. We have 3 parking items that we're going to cover. Talk a little bit more, bringing some information back about TOT rates, the CalPERS Trust, CSNR seasonal hours, Measure Y, and then some of the year, we had a request outside of the meeting for year-end stats. We're going to talk about that. So overall, the city's cash position isn't great. We've talked about this before. The contingency is about $500,000 below the target that we have established by policy. And on top of that, we have about another $100,000 that's going to come out of that for the districting process. So we're around $600,000 low in our contingency reserve. The emergency reserve is about $379,000 below the target. Again, these are primarily due to the impacts from the 2023 storms, both direct expenditures from these, as well as then very tight budgets as we were waiting for FEMA and not increasing funding as our general fund grew. So that's what those are attributable to. Finance Director Malberg also mentioned the fund balance position, that we have about $100,000 currently in fund balance, and we'd like to have $500,000 there. So we have also talked at the last meeting about potential one-time revenue. This is the slide that we presented 2 weeks ago, talking about back payment of old TOT, building permit revenue we may get from a major project, surplus land sale, FEMA reimbursement for about $1 million, and an insurance claim that we were hoping for around $500,000. Update. In the last 2 weeks, we've received confirmation the building permit project is moving forward. It's the affordable housing project on 38th. They received their tax credits this last week and are preparing to move forward. We've estimated that at about $300,000 in next year's budget for one-time revenue from building. In addition, we just received confirmation that our insurance claims for the second storm damage event has been approved. And we are waiting for final confirmation on the amount, but it will be between $750,000 and $1 million. We're hoping closer to the $1 million. So that's very good news. We will have more details. We don't have the checks yet, but at this point, we're looking at between $1 million to $1.3 million in one-time revenue coming in next fiscal year, even without those other one-time revenue sources coming in. So next slide, please. So summarizes, this is summarizing, I think, everything I just said, is that we're low by about 1.4 million approximately. And then we've identified between $2 and $2.25 million of potential one-time money coming in this year. We have confirmed that figure, as I mentioned before, the $1 million to $1.3 million, and we are still waiting on FEMA OES reimbursements. So at this point, we're recommending the first thing we do with the one-time revenue is get ourselves back to the cash position, our policy cash positions we want to be in. And then once we get beyond that, we use it to look for one-time uses for projects or programs that are one-time, not ongoing. And we can reevaluate this situation when we get to our first quarterly update, which I think we're planning on doing in December this year. Next, we have 3 parking items the council asked us to follow through on. First, increasing the meter parking rates. Second, expanding the village parking zone to the north and to the neighborhoods. And then the third is the holiday parking. So we have had the opportunity to speak to Coastal Commission staff about our rates. Currently, it's $2 in the village, $1 in the back lots per hour. Coastal Commission staff had no negative feedback. They thought that it was fine if the city wanted to consider a rate increase. Their piece of feedback, which actually mirrored feedback we've heard from the BIA, is ensuring a discrepancy not between the village and the upper lots to encourage people to park up there rather than kind of hunting and pecking through the village for spots. So as for planning information for the council, each 25 cents an hour in the village for from the $2 is worth about $100,000 a year to the city, and each 25 cents in the back lots here is worth about $60,000 a year to the city. So for example, if we were to increase the village by 50 cents and the back lots by 25, $250,000 a year probably would be a decent planning figure. The next slide, please. We asked about considering expanding the paid parking zone. I think that's north of Cap Ave. And Coastal Commission was decidedly less enthusiastic. They identified that as free coastal access parking and mentioned that, we would need to show mitigation for that they said, more bike lanes, more bike parking, free parking somewhere else, more trails. Said they used the word fully mitigate any potential negative impacts to maximize access. So I think that's code for it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And it could be something we would want to look into. Maybe if we did have a future project to do any of these things, at that point, maybe it becomes more feasible. And then lastly, there was a question about the village holiday parking at the last budget hearing. We estimate about 65 to 70K a year in parking revenue loss. There's also reductions in the parking citation data for the month. That's a pretty rough estimate because historically the parking staff have used the that break as a time to take off. But we do estimate that there's maybe $30,000 a year more of citation data if the meters are active through that period of time. If the council wanted to consider it, there has been an identified need to replace the village trash cans. They're not looking great. I think high-end commercial trash cans, probably $50,000, $60,000, somewhere along those lines. So just that's a point of reference for the council if you wanted to consider or have further discussions about that. And I'm going to pause before we kind of dive into our next bits of council follow through and see if there's any questions.
Well, I'm the one who raised the issue of adding parking meters to the back part of the village. And it sounds like that's going to be pretty complicated to do right now. And we would generate a lot more revenue by focusing on rate increases. So I'm willing to say, save that idea for a different time when it may be more feasible. But I would be in favor of looking at an increase in the parking revenue rates. I think the holiday parking one is an interesting one. I don't have any real data. Maybe the chief has some data or someone else has done a study. My guess is that when the parking is free down in the village, there are a whole lot more employees who park in the village from Thanksgiving to Christmas than do otherwise, park because it's expensive to park down there. And so I honestly don't know how many more sort of spaces, how much more traffic there is down there. So seems like we need to have some discussion with, the businesses and get a little more information and sort of figure out if would we be better off taking the money and doing something down in the village that would enhance the village? Would that be a better solution than having the free parking? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I agree at that outreach, but at the same meeting, maybe we talk about, the impact of raising the parking. I think we all have to look at it, looking at the bottom line budget. We start to say, 50 cents, $200,000 needs our budget, but I'd like to just make sure that we reach out for the communication. So I don't know if that's a small group of people that get together with the BIA and talk about that impact is, but I think those should all be on the table to look at. And with the caveat, look at if there are some enhancements that fall along in place with that to make it better. So that's what I'd be in favor of that, of looking at it.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of both of those too, but I really do think we need to speak with the BIA on both the raising of the cost of parking and if we were to get rid of holiday parking. and maybe even just try it for a one-year trial to see if it made a difference or not to the businesses.
I think we should increase the rates. $2 is really cheap. I wouldn't go 50 cents or a quarter. I'd go at least $1 more, so $3. And if we want to make our lot a quarter less, then sure. And I think it's a great idea to not just subsidize the parking, but to say we can use that fund for enhancement, for actual improvements like beautifying the trash cans. I think that's really important. I would agree to stopping the holiday parking for actual infrastructure improvements.
I have a question. Was there an update on the TOT back payment? I know we went over it briefly, but I don't really remember what we said.
They have started paying. We're going to pay. We have a settlement agreement with them, and they have started paying.
Okay, great. And then, I don't know if we know, but by increasing the parking rates, should we decide to do that, how soon would that be able to take effect, or would that have to?
So the parking rates, I might have to lean on the community development director here. I know we can control them. I don't know if we would do it by ordinance or do we do it by resolution?
We would have to do a coastal development permit. So we've changed our code recently, and rather than updating the long-range planning document for coastal, for our LCP, we switched the language to say that we'd have to issue a coastal development permit to increase the rates.
And is there like a timeline associated with that? How long those take to?
I think it would probably take some, the public engagement period, but to actually do the permit, it would be a permit that goes to planning commission. So not that long once we have those numbers.
I think it's in our muni code, so I think it would be an ordinance, and it may be possible that council could issue the CDP in conjunction with the ordinance. So I think it's something that technically probably we could get done in 2 council meetings. I think obviously the outreach, I heard from multiple council members about, talking to the BIA, maybe coming back, bringing that feedback and getting direction from council. And then we could come back with a first reading of an ordinance, and then it would be a second reading with the issuance of a CDP, I think. So long way of saying maybe 2 months.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking ballpark. I just didn't know if this wouldn't be affecting us until, down the lane or whatever. Okay, cool. I guess comment on holiday parking. I would assume that we would maintain our same level of staff during that time. So in reality, they would be ticketing those cars that are overstaying their 3-hour welcome.
That's correct.
Okay. So if it is, which you're right, Ms. Westman, there are employees that park down there, and maybe when they receive a ticket that are now more expensive, they will understand the 3-hour rule and also be helping the city. So I'm not in favor at this moment of getting rid of that personally, but again, I'm open to reaching out to the community. And that's all that I have.
One thing we do that outreach, could we include in that too? I think it's been changed with the junior guard program, with the passes that are being issued out. And can we look at what is the direct cost of that? Because if they were paying for parking, there'd be some revenue. So, maybe we look at it for next year. Does the junior guard program have a fixed fee, and then there's a cost on the top to have a parking pass? So maybe if we just look at all those at one time. I'm interested to see your thoughts about that.
Wasn't there like a discrepancy? Like they were receiving the permits and they were supposed to be for the back 2 lots, but they were utilizing them in the village. And so maybe, is there a way we can clear that? Right.
But you're stealing our thunder from later in the presentation.
Oh,
I'll let you kind of go, but just so you know, it was still free.
okay.
So I was just saying,
Okay.
I think it'd be
Yeah.
whatever the fee is, and then you buy a parking pass. But if that's
Yeah,
what the
because I
city
mean, we
manager's gonna
charge
do,
for the surf and coffee. Not very much, but. Oh, okay. Sorry if I'm getting ahead of us. I apologize.
We do actually have a stopping point to talk about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll stop then.
Yeah, so-
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, let's get back to that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so, so then also council asked about the TOT rates. So you can see on this chart, we're at a 12% TOT. This is hotel tax for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with what TOT is. It's the tax paid by visitors when they stay in a short-term rental. It's a hotel or a STR, short-term rental. So we're 12%. 12% is a pretty common number overall, other than Marina and Anaheim in this example. The County of Santa Cruz and the City of Santa Cruz have a higher rate for their STRs. And I think the thinking behind that is the STRs, the Airbnbs, they don't have the same, they put more costs on the jurisdiction than a hotel does because they don't have on-site staff. So there's nobody, when people have problems, they're calling Chief Ryan's folks and we respond. So that is, I think, the logic behind the City of Santa Cruz and the county. We don't have a large STR zone. As the council knows, it's generally sort of from here down into the village. About a third of our revenue comes from STRs, 2/3 comes from the hotels. And the math is a 1% TOT change is worth about $180,000. If we were to mirror what the county and the City of Santa Cruz and we went to 14 for the STRs, it would be around 100,000, maybe 120,000 a year. The downside is it does require a vote. You have to go, so it'd have to be on the ballot with the voters. And it's not a very large amount of money. It doesn't sort of bend the city's fiscal trajectory. So I think staff would suggest that it's something we could continue to evaluate, look at future elections. If there's a specific project that we wanted to fund with the revenue, maybe it becomes the funding source for that project. And obviously would require outreach to our hotel operators. All right, next slide. So this was an idea that came up about the CalPERS Retirement Trust. There's currently $1.8 million in it. We set it up to sort of serve as a bit of a buffer, particularly for mall redevelopment many years ago. We've contributed about $1.3 million to the fund. I think most recently was in 22, 23, maybe? So we have made $500,000 in investment returns on it. Our current UAL payment is $3.3 million and growing, and we can utilize it any given year to just pay our UAL payment and it would be gone, but it does act as a reserve for the city. So at this stage, staff does and we are getting market returns on it. I got the report today and I think the 3-year average was over 10%. So at this point, our recommendation is stay the course and either start using it when we sort of see the peak in the UAL and we try to shave off the top, or when the mall redevelopment happens, which I feel like I have been saying for many years in this chair. So I understand that people are frustrated, but we have recently implemented the zoning, and I think the ball is in the developer's court at this point. Next slide. Now we'll turn it over to Jim.
I'm going to do the next couple of slides. So during the May 6th hearing, there was a question about the part-time seasonal hours in recreation, and I think we were showing like a 4,000 hour increase. So I had updated the numbers for the proposed and planned, but I hadn't updated prior fiscal years. So there was multiple years of increases. So now that I've trued up all of those numbers going back to 23, 24, the actual increase year over year is 1329, which I think is what Director Bryant had said off the top of her head last time. And junior guard parking. So Vice Mayor Jensen had just mentioned the junior guard parking. So currently we do not charge it for the lower lot. We do that to encourage parking down there to mitigate the drop-offs and all of the traffic down in the village. We could consider a nominal fee. We would want to still encourage people to park in those lower lots. We just want to make it the people parking there are the people that actually need it and not just getting a free pass and hanging out all day. We've done a little bit of analysis on this. I think if we did a $20 fee, you'd probably get around $8,000 to $10,000 of revenue. I don't know that it's it's going to generate much revenue, but it would make people take a little bit of ownership of those parking passes and understand how they work. If the council wanted us to look into that, we could definitely do that. We've already done all of the registration for this summer's program, so it would kick in next spring. So it's definitely something we could have ready to queue up for the next year's registration.
The other point I would make around that is the renaming the lots, the City Hall upper and lower lot. I hope will help with that, because when we called them the beach and village lots, the passes said beach and village lot passes. And people were consistently arguing, I think, with our parking enforcement that it says it's a village parking pass. And so that's one piece that we really have, we hope we've cleaned up. But I think the notion of a nominal fee, as council's noted, I think it was initially put in place to really try to mitigate those traffic impacts from 12 to 1, because it was a problem. And it has helped. Definitely, you see a lot of people parking back there, not crowding into the village to pick up and drop off. So I think now that we've gotten some folks trained in that behavior and some families, you put a nominal fee on it. You say, I acknowledge that this is for this lot only. I checked, the coffee permits are $55. So that's a whole year of morning parking, $20 for the lower lot. Gets them to sign a thing saying they know what it's for, and they don't contest tickets anymore.
Well, it certainly seems like it cost us something to issue these permits. I mean, there's some cost there. I have no idea what it is, whether it's $10 or $20, but there's a cost to us to issue the permits. We certainly should recover any costs that we incur by issuing the permit itself. And if it ends up being, like a $20 fee or whatever it is, it seems to me that that's quite reasonable. I do think it's an excellent idea because, walking through that lot a lot during the weekdays, there's never anyone in that lower lot. So if we can have them parked down there and keep them out of the village, that's a win-win for us and for the village as well. So I'd like to keep it low, but have some sort of, I don't think we should subsidize it.
Yeah, I think just sending a message that there's not free parking in Capitola, just kind of sends a good message from that standpoint. And maybe they'll find out that, that $20 is a great deal.
So Measure Y, I have a few slides I'm going to put up here for Measure Y, a couple of different ways to look at it. So this is out of the second draft of the budget, and what we were trying to demonstrate here is the Measure Y revenue. So this is total Measure Y revenue of just about 2.3 million, and then listing the eligible items within the ballot language that Measure Y could be used for. So that is the total cost of the items that we currently have money going towards the items that were listed in the ballot language. So 2.3 million towards 10.5 million worth of expenses. So the other expenses are being covered by other general fund revenues. This is a graph, a pie chart, very similar to what you saw last year, showing when the equity adjustments and the benefit increases when Measure Y became effective. Those were implemented in the last pay period start, I think late December of 2024. And then the COLAs and steps tied to that contract that were implemented July 1st of 2025 is kind of the top, all the blues and whatever that, I think those are all blues. The bottom piece of the pie, CalPERS UAL. So we have a total increase in CalPERS UAL over the last 2 years of just under $720,000. So what we have left of Measure Y covers about half of that, $360,000, and then there's another $359,000 that's getting covered with other general fund revenues. That's a different way to look at it, similar to what we saw last year. At the last council meeting, there was also a suggestion to show Measure Y projects coming out of the general fund, even if that created a negative fund balance. So I've done that. On this slide, I've added where we used to do the employee down payment, a Measure Y project. The first year, and I'm just using 250,000. The first year, it creates an imbalanced budget, and we wouldn't recommend doing that. However, the second year, we do have a balanced budget, so this might be a good way to kind of start earmarking future Measure Y funds for council priorities. We're going to have one-time revenue coming in. Those fund balances should look a lot better. So this would be one way to do that. I think that was the 3 different ways that we kind of set up to show Measure Y, and I'll pause there. And see if we have feedback on that.
I guess one more detail that may not have been, I'm sure was clear to folks, but I'm just going to reiterate. The uses that we listed out in the budget for Measure Y were the example services that were called out in the ballot measure. The ballot measure, it's for general government uses, so it's a general fund tax. The things that were called out, public safety, emergency services, potholes, streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, beaches, wharf, those are examples of general fund taxes, but I think some people felt like those were exactly what these funds needed to be used for.
Thanks for that. I'll just take that a little bit further. I don't think they were what they thought they were. I know actually as a person going out campaigning for it, I told people that there was going to be money for projects. So, because that's what was kind of laid out. So what those projects were and everything like that. So I think that's just a statement that I think a lot of people that were involved on the committee and that pushed for it. But if you go back to the chart that you had, the pie chart that you had, yeah. So I mean what that really shows, and I mean the elephant in the room is that the money all went to PERS and to salaries, and that there's in this year, and that there is no money left over from how it's been allocated for any other projects at this time, right? Yeah, and I think, I just think it just doesn't feel great to say that, but I mean, those are just the facts. There is no other money for Measure Y, and hopefully sales tax go up, and then there's more money, and then hopefully, and we can talk about how, with the line item Measure Y and trying to show the community that we're doing projects out of Measure Y and how that's funded. But right now, what Measure Y, that the sales tax, that really is Measure F in one part and Measure Y in the other part, has been put together, and it's 100% just for salaries and benefits to the employee group at the city.
I would say operations.
Well, let's define operations, sorry.
Well, I mean, you said you threw Measure F in there, so Measure F has been getting pulled into operations since before the pandemic. So I wouldn't say Measure F is going to just salaries.
I was just been like Measure F's gone, right? So that's the corporate and sales tax. The other half. So like I was just trying to be just very quick because some people say to me, "Well, where's Measure F money?" Like Measure F is gone. It's all Measure Y. It's a 0.5% sales tax, and so that's where it is.
Correct.
So, okay.
I think the only other detail I would add is it's here. It is in this budget. This budget is where we got 23 million. And it represents 10% of that total. And you can see the charts and graphics about where our money goes and whether you can earmark it for something, but this budget represents how we're spending the general fund, and it represents 10% of the general fund approximately.
Yeah, we just have to go, I don't go back and forth, it says if the city's sales tax measure on November 24th doesn't pass, the status quo remains in place. And it wouldn't be because we wouldn't have the money for where we are today and there would be cuts, right? So those are what the facts are. I'm just trying to really just be once and for all, just lay it out. And if I'm wrong, I appreciate the pushback and the clarification, but I just want to be really clear so we can move on from this issue and figure out what we can do with some conversation about maybe have a line item in the budget for Measure Y. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Yeah, I do. This is important, and thank you for putting this out there and explaining it. but we do need to continue to make it easier for everybody just to see what actually is really going on. Thank you.
Yeah, my only comment is I think that when we do these kinds of tax measures, we just need to make it clear on the measure that it is just a tax that's going to go into the city's general fund. I think people were partly confused because the tax measure that we did prior to that was one that required a 66% vote. And in those, you can designate parts that will go, like we designated money to go toward youth. And then when we passed this tax, people obviously picked out things that they liked. That's why they voted for it. But the reality is that it was a general fund tax. And so all of the money goes into the general fund. And, unfortunately, at the time that this tax was passed, there were several things that happened in the city as far as the UAL going up and as far as there being a study about salaries and employees. And with all of that combined, it did take all of the money that Measure Y generated to cover those costs. And my recommendation is just next time be a little clearer. Is this a general fund tax, or is this a tax that things are going to go to special projects?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, too, I think that is very clear, but also as we were working through this as on council, we were working with police officers and other members of staff and really trying to word this in a intelligent way. We were trying to get them to a salary that was just within even 5%. They're not even at like medians from surrounding places that we would compare Capitola to pay-wise. So I don't want it to go unsaid that this wasn't something like a boatload of cash coming in to staff up and hire a bunch of new people. It's like it's helping us maintain the amazing staff members that we already have, and these agreements were made, and the staff members were aware of the importance of this tax measure. So, and yes, I just think with the way finances went, we just didn't luck out in the end on that end. Maybe if it was another $250,000 that we had to put more into the wharf or whatnot, I mean, of course that would have been amazing. But we're here, and yes, I'll echo what Ms. Westman said. I think I guess more clarity moving forward for the community and those voting on it. All right, we have some year-end stats.
So we did receive a request regarding year-end statistics. So in the community profile and supplementary information sections that are in the final published budget that we published in September, we include these two sections. It has year-end statistics, it has comparable information, and then some other, I think, a bunch of definitions and stuff. And we received the request to have it for the police department, recreation, and business license. Most of that data isn't available until around August. It would be kind of a heavy lift to do the police department and the recreation stuff now, just to repeat it again. The business license I can run kind of anytime we push a button. So I do have the business license stats up there. And I think we've been sending those out quarterly through the Friday updates. But all of that stuff will be included in the final budget document that we publish in September. It's part of the requirement for our award that we get.
Are we going to have time to ask a couple budget questions? I mean, when you finish your
Yes.
presentation?
Yes, I was just going to get in next steps. FAC meeting next week, regular council meeting on the 11th. Our deadline to adopt the budget is June 25th. And so tonight our recommended action is to receive the proposed budget, identify any additional questions, direction on any of the follow-up items, and then direct staff to either cancel remaining special budget meetings or continue budget deliberations to June 11th regular meeting. Or we could just prepare for final budget consideration on June 25th. And we could present any recommendations from the FAC at either one of those two meetings as well. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Confused me a bit. So if you go to page 47 in our budget, we have general fund expenditures, and under there we have supplies. And in going through other parts of the budget, some of the numbers, like in community services and recreation, we say that it's going to be $97,300 for supplies. But if you look at the department budget, we have a slightly different number in there. Some of them are higher, some of them are lower. Are we going to reconcile those numbers? I mean, the same's true in the museum. You know, we have like 17,350 here listed for the museum. But if you look at their budget page, they only have 2,350. Parks and Rec has 97 here, and on their budget page, they have 112,300. I mean, we're just so close. It seems like we need to make certain that that those are in order.
I'd have to go through and look at all of these.
I don't want to be nitpicky, but I just don't want us to end up.
Yeah, the answer is that, yeah, all of that stuff will be cleaned up before the final. Okay. And any changes, anything that impacts any of the numbers will be.
And since I asked the police chief last time about her MSO officer, I was wondering if she could just give us a couple of comments about what we can expect to see happen now that you're going to have a new person. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
I'm used to it.
mm-hmm.
So with the bringing in the MSOs, we will see our vehicle abatement program revitalized, as well as increased even more parking enforcement. It is, I think, number 3 on their job description, as well as supporting our initiatives within the community, with the school, with e-bike, community outreach. I have an expectation that they're going to help to collaborate with us in our community meetings. Sorry, it's awkward because I really can't see you.
Okay.
And so, and then the support that they'll give to patrol in terms of the non-emergency related calls. We have several of those each day. So that will take some of the workload off of the police officers for non-suspect related calls for service.
Well, those were actually some of the things I wanted to hear, because I think the e-bike issue in town seems to be a major one right now. And having someone who's going to be sort of dedicated and working on that program will be amazing for our community. And knowing that the officers are going to have a little more time to perhaps write a few more traffic tickets and stop sign tickets will be great too. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm glad we got to do it.
We are too.
My last question is, I do have a couple about recreation. I will start off by saying I've always been supportive of recreation programs, and the city has always put general fund money into our recreation programs so they can happen, because they're overall a real benefit to the community itself. And I understand that with the new community center, and the new parks, there's going to be some additional revenues generated out of the recreation programs. I think I'm correct that the new programs all totaled will generate about $126,000 of new revenue to the city for its general fund. I will confess that I was a little concerned seeing that our general fund contribution is going up by 51,000 and something dollars. And it looks like we're anticipating for the following year it would need to go up another $20,000. So I was wondering if that is correct, or if there are plans to come up with more money generating activities. I know when we talked about fees at the last time, I think there was a consensus among the council members that we have a brand new facility, brand new park, and we're hoping to, maximize the investment that's gone into that to increase revenue that comes back to us. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So the numbers that you were just looking at, were those predominantly the contract services numbers?
No, what I'm looking at is on page 72. It's the budget for the recreation department that's included in here. And as I said, it looks like the cost for next year from this last year to next year is going up about $167,000. And where I calculated that money came from was that you plan to generate a new $126,000, 75 in classes, 12,000 from junior guards, another 18,000 in Camp Capitola, and 20,000 from additional, which leaves an additional 151,000 that has to come out of the general fund. And then for the following year, it would require another $20,000 out of the general fund. So for me, I know we're going to have to spend some general fund money, and recreation provides a real service. I just, seeing it go up 50,000 this year and 20 next, suddenly 70,000 more. I was hopeful that we were going to sort of stay at the level that we were at with our general fund contribution.
Okay, so I think I understand. Thank you for reiterating that. So a lot of the increases that we're experiencing in this budget do have to do with moving back into the community center.
Okay.
We had reduced, not too much, but we had reduced our classes services, and so there's a direct cost relationship with the independent contractors that we hire. So they have an expense because we pay out to them, but then we also have revenue that is developed from that. So both of those increased as a result. And so we saw some of that. We also did have some basic increases, things are just getting more expensive. So the brochures that we mail out, just the cost of paper is getting more and more expensive, and the printing cost. And so there were some larger increases for some of those expenses that probably have to do with how everything is getting a little more expensive. Regarding the community center, the estimates for potential revenue are there. Without having history, it is a hard thing to really, put that dart in the right spot. And so definitely hoping that once we get some good history on the interest of the community center, what the rental, how people are interested in it, what kinds of rentals that they're interested in, we're going to be able to develop a good rental package that is already part of the work plan and have a better understanding for future budgets, which hopefully will not include a similar increase as to what you're expecting, other than just a regular CPI adjustment. The fees for all of the programs did go through a regular CPI adjustment, and those are incorporated just as we would per the fee schedule and the fee study that was done a year ago.
Right. So the fee schedule is going to come back to us at a later date for us to consider those.
June 11th, yeah.
June 11th, okay. I just had one last question. We're also, increasing the hours, the hourly people that we're going to have this year. And I assume the increase of the hourly people is to increase the size of the programs, the Camp Capitola program, the Junior Guard program, and
So the increase in hourlies that Director Malberg just showed on there, it's related to two things. The first one is that we increase the capacity for Camp Capitola, and there's always that relationship there. When you add more kids, you add more staff. But that's a smaller number of the hours. That was like in the 400s of adding a camp staff. But then additionally, because we are anticipating more activity in the community center, we have added a additional recreation assistant who will be part of the front desk team. And then we'll have a full coverage. Whereas right now, like, we don't have a recreation assistant that covers weekends, and we only have them there part-time. So it would be an additional 20-hour-a-week person. And so that comes to the 960 hours. And so if you put that together, that's what the increase that you're seeing.
And I have one last question, and either you or the city manager can answer this one. We can't have any alcohol at the community center, is my understanding. And it certainly seems like it would be a very attractive, now that it's completely redone, place for a wedding reception or some other events where, alcohol could be served, even if you limit it to beer and wine and something like that. So I wondered if there's any possibility of changing that status.
So unfortunately, the reason why there is not alcohol allowed at the community center is because the community center is on school district property. The city has an MOU with the school district that is a long-term lease for the property and for the building. And so the school district's policies apply to the land. They do have a very strict criteria that for, like, if fundraisers happen on school property, many of us have probably experienced a booster club situation. Schools have very, very strict criteria, which is really hard to meet for your typical renter. The number one thing being is that if there is alcohol served, it needs to be done in a fundraising capacity, and there can be no children allowed on the property. And just by the nature of the playground and the activities, that criteria has never been able to be met for any of the rental interests within the building.
So I was just a little curious when that changed, because I can remember when there was a Begonia festival, they would have spaghetti dinners up there, and I believe wine was served. And I remember the city having a retirement party for me, and I know there was alcohol served. I remember that event. So I just wondered, at what point, working with the school district, did this change?
It changed in 2009. At that point, we were in litigation with the school district, and we entered a settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement included specific terms, which included the no alcohol from the school district. So I remember that because it was before, when I was community development director, before I was city manager, and there was a settlement agreement with the school district and sort of amended the lease and said no alcohol.
Thank you.
Maybe it's something we can revisit with the school district, because I know they have silent auction nights where they serve wine at the school.
We can ask them. I mean, I know it is included in the lease as Director Bryant mentioned.
Yeah, they do. They have yeah, I've been to those too. Thank you.
Any more questions?
I think that will sort of take care of me for now.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Sorry, I kind of put mine in the same format that we had last time, so if I could just go through kind of each, maybe just department, because I had some just clarifying questions. I think the first one was with PD. Chief, I got you a couple questions. With I always say it wrong, but the Supplemental Law Enforcement Grant Fund, the SLUF, is that what it's called? Is that money being earmarked out differently? Because I know in the past years, since I've been on council, different things get charged to it, and I think there's some perceptions around that money is kind of earmarked just for police or some items or whatever, and I was just wondering between your guidance and maybe the city manager or Director Mulber on how that's going to be used and how we can show that money that comes in. I think it's $104,000 this year is being directed.
104, is that more or less? I don't think it's always consistent.
We receive $100,000 a year. I think the 4,000 is my estimate for interest earnings on that while it's sitting in there.
So the money is it's supplemental for law enforcement, for public safety only. And I mean, Director Mulber could probably speak more to the history with previous chiefs, how it's been used. What we are right now working with is the fact that it was earmarked to stand up technologies that we're utilizing right now that are part of our everyday work now. And so moving forward, my hope is that we can move some of that and find, when we're talking about body cameras and drones and some of the equipment that we use, that's regular equipment that we're using that should be in our regular budget versus a one-time purchase. If I don't know if that answers your exact question.
It does. I guess I look at so let's say a new drone comes out, right? A new drone program or something like that, and you and your department think there's still money left there. Does that ever come back to council to talk about we have this money and this is the way we're going to allocate it out, or is it just into a fund that's just used internally?
Not typically. So if a piece of equipment breaks and then we need to replace it, I mean, if we're talking about the drone program, because we have an existing program, if we want to start a new program, absolutely council would be included in that, and we would, seek guidance and permission and buy-in if we wanted to partake in a new program. But to replace something, that becomes a conversation between myself and Director Mulberg and the city manager.
So we just know that the money is coming now. It's just going to, right now, is the way it's designed. It's just going to operate or it's in place now. And if anything's new, we'd be notified as a council of a new addition.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
On point with.
Yeah, I was just going to add that right now we have a placeholder for supplies. We haven't technically identified anything, but Chief Ryan was correct. It has to be for frontline law enforcement. It has to wear a badge for eligible expenditures. And we try to keep it on, like she was saying, the one-time things for the new stuff. But once we get into where that's part of your standard operating equipment, then we kind of shift that over. Perfect. So, but as new things come up, we'll definitely be in front of council.
So one thing I was glad to hear about the MSO, that a vehicle abatement is going to be maybe more enforced. I've heard that there's the towing fund is not adequate for us to be towing sometimes larger vehicles, RVs or something like that if needed, and because there's a hazardous waste and everything. Has the budget, and I haven't looked, has the budget been adjusted at all for a towing to support the new MSO who can tow, but hopefully there's money that he can tow?
It's my understanding that we have not increased our towing
Off the top of my head, I don't
balance.
think so.
We have not.
I would just hope that we could maybe come back and look at that in the final thing, because I've just heard that I think it's very low, and I hear like we could maybe tow, and I'm just using RVs as an example, like maybe 2 RVs a year or something like that, because they're so expensive to get rid of, and it just kind of defeats the
It
drive.
is very low, and if we were to tow a couple of RVs a year, we would drain that account.
Right, and I just want to make sure I'm not focusing on RVs and vehicles and everything, but I know RVs just because the waste that's in them sometimes are very expensive.
Correct.
So we only bumped from 4,000 to 5,000 this year.
So is that something that we could look at and, or talk to council, just to make sure that that's going to be a project that, or can be funded?
Yeah, we can definitely track that and then come back mid-year, or actually quarterly if we needed to, and adjust. But I agree, I think we need to.
Can I ask a question about towing? I mean, you see these signs everywhere that it says your vehicle will be towed at the owner's expense. So is that not what happens if, say, we were to tow a vehicle?
Where you're seeing those signs are private property.
Okay.
So like for example, we've discussed previously some of the issues with the motorhomes that have collected in the CVS parking lot on 41st Avenue. There's challenges around that because of the fact that they're on private property.
Okay.
What you see on our public streets that's when we give them the 72-hour notice. So if the vehicle's moved within that 72-hour time frame, and we have had folks that do the move around of the boats and the motorhomes within that 72 hours, and we can't legally tow the car.
Okay. Cool. That was my
A
question.
little bit more for you on that is if it's an old dilapidated vehicle, they just won't go pick it up. And so then the city is on the hook for the cost. So just if we're going to wait until mid-year, but is a message to the chief that we want you to be able to do your job and spend money properly as correct. And then whatever that number comes to, we'll adjust so they can continue. Okay. I've heard some feedback like, oh, it's hard to get something to do. So with that, I just need to say again that I'm just concerned about our parking number being so high. Everybody says that we're going to be there. It's just, I go back to, my concern is that when it was $37 or $38, whatever it was to park, people are like, that's a great deal. Now as people get educated that it costs so much, they're probably not going to do this much. And that just concerns me. And we're really basing a huge number in our budget that balances our budget this year on the backs of your department, on really hoping that there's bad behavior that continues in Capitola for parking so we could stay above the line. So just it concerns me, and I was just hoping that maybe I didn't hear you correctly, but you'll be coming back with parking numbers for us, or not directly for us, but I mean for yourself, and checking those to make sure, because it is so volatile and what that goes. Okay. All right, that's all I had for PD. With rec, a couple questions. So I was just concerned, and maybe I heard you wrong, but the hours gone up because the enrollment's gone up, right? And that, like you got you said maybe additional staff person at the front desk to answer to interact with the community. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the increase in seasonal hourly staff is related to the addition of a recreation assistant in response to what we anticipate having more activity in our new community center, as well as increasing the capacity in Camp Capitola.
Maybe I'm just looking at this completely wrong, but other departments, when they get super busy, they don't bring in additional staff, right? So I was just like, if there's a whole bunch more parking, then it gets into overtime, and then we have an overtime. So is this your counterbalance to the, not overtime, this is kind of overtime? Is that how you guys look at it? And there's a direct cost to it?
Yeah, that's actually, so with the seasonal hourly positions, they are 960 positions. So that means that they are capped with the number of hours that they are able to work within a calendar year due to PERS. So they could work overtime, but that gets them faster to that 960 cap. And so with the majority of the seasonal staff that that are in the community services and recreation department, they have to fit within that. And so in order to create more capacity, whereas PD does overtime and Public Works does overtime, that's how they create more capacity during those busy seasons. We don't have that opportunity because we have that 960 cap for the temporary seasonals.
Right. I also saw when I was looking at the allocations how it changed. They also look like they changed from classification. Is there a price or is there a cost difference to the city in those classifications? So I think they were like youth person, now they're like Rec 1. Is there a cost to those?
You mean within the step increases for the positions?
So in the titles of the positions. So I think they were called youth. Well, here's one. Let's see, before they were called something, and then now they're called a recreational leader 1. And I think they were before called a coordinator. So is there a cost difference to those?
Yeah, so when you're looking in the budget, it shows the history of positions. And some of those positions over time, as the department has grown and developed, some of those positions have become different positions, but in order to maintain the history, they continue to occur in the printed budget. Within the actual job descriptions in the positions that hasn't really changed from this year to last year to even the year before. And so the positions that are hired for Camp Capitola, those are leaders, recreation leaders, and we have a recreation leader 1 and 2 that work within the program, and they have pay stubs that are posted on the website within our seasonal hourly schedule for all of our seasonal employees. The majority of that seasonal hourly schedule is community services and recreation employees.
They're classified last year, and then it looks like there's different this year. And so I was just wondering, other than the hours hit to the budget?
Where are you seeing a difference in classification?
Some of that could be me correcting the tables year over year as well.
I was just wondering, like, is it, are there $10 an hour for all those employees they moved to different classification, and there's 1,320 more hours in rec, and so that's why the offset to the city of funding rec is growing, or is it just clearing?
I think if I gave you the year over year delta for what we pay, like the total cost for seasonals, that would probably help you out.
I'm trying to get, I was just trying to understand.
Yeah, I think some of these is
budget,
me
I'd ask
putting them
questions.
into these categories, and I've never sat down with Nikki and made sure that I actually got them 100% correct. So if we wanted to go through and like map all of these out, I would probably want to go back and clean it up.
I just want to make sure it wasn't like we changed all these classifications and there's a cost difference and then there's extra hours. And when we're looking at budgets for every department and we're cutting back training, I just want to make sure we're
No,
not.
and she can, correct me if I'm wrong, but she could she could have youth coordinators one year and rec assistants the next year. It's just however we recruit for it.
But they're all about the same pay range.
They would be, rec assistants I think are lower than coordinators,
Correct.
top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, just a question.
Yeah, there are not recreation coordinators that are seasonal staff any longer. That change happened quite a while ago. Yeah, but right now, any seasonal employees, they are recreation leaders or specialists.
Yeah, I'm sorry about like the detailed questions. Just when we have a tight budget and we're not having staff getting trained, I think every $1,000 is important. And then one thing, if we could shift over just to Arts Commission, which I think we didn't really get into talk about, but I saw that the art funds are down this year from what they were last year, and that's because it does look like there's as much revenue coming in. Is that correct? On public art stuff, it was 120, now it's like 60 or something like that. And I think it's just, we have projects that are ongoing, right? Like the art on the public art, yeah.
So I could tell you that we do have public art funds that are encumbered right now in a total of $85,000. And so that is what is part of the budget, because that is the projects that the Art and Cultural Commission is currently working on. And then just going off of my last art and cultural staff report, I believe the funds were $135,000.
And just and I think the city manager and I've had this conversation in the past, and maybe it's one of these things we could put on the agenda in the future, but with the 2% that gets paid in, there's just some question about, does the city pay in the 2% also, or does it not? I know, and I think it's more of a language issue that probably needs to be cleaned up, because developers pay in 2%, correct, on projects into public art. And so and I think, if I remember, I think it says over $250,000, right? Mm-hmm. And so we obviously don't have any projects right now in the city that would fall into that, right? Like the Tesla is not a $250,000, or is that going to be paying into it?
Tesla project will be paying into it. Yeah, the language talks about every project that's over $250,000 that gets a building permit. So the only projects that we've had in the city since I've been here that I think would qualify would be the community center and the library. And both of them, we incorporated public art into it. The city council is often, it's 1%. It would be it's 1% in the art ordinance that gets paid into the fund. We always could. The city council could always make a general fund contribution to the public art fund.
I was just trying to understand. I think maybe in the future just to clean up, because I know there's some questions about it. I think just.
Yeah, the language is a little awkward, and you kind of tease it out, and you end up with $250,000 and a building permit. So like paving projects, it doesn't apply to.
Right.
And they're relatively infrequent.
All right.
We don't get building permits we don't build buildings that often.
Perfect. And that's all for rec. And I had just a couple more, I apologize, was for our planning department. Just to highlight the $20,000 that we allotted last year, could you just be from a positive, like how did that help you this year? How you used it, and then the money that's going to come in this year, if there's some left over, and then the new $20,000, how you see the big vision of that?
Great. So the $20,000 this past year, a portion of that was put towards the retail study that was done for the mall redevelopment and gave us the numbers that we use while drafting the new ordinance. That was a portion of it. Currently, Kaiser Marston Associates is working on, we're updating our community benefits section of the code, and we'll be incorporating benefits for economic incentives. One being hotels, the other a net increase in retail on sites. So they've been reviewing those updates that we have drafted and providing input on how we could make those ordinances more appealing to developers. And then moving forward in following years, several ideas have come up of how to utilize those funds. One idea is we do have the Swenson lot in the Capitola Village. I think it would be great if once we see, as a partnership with the Swenson developers, to do a study of how a development of a hotel on that site can make the economics of the village grow, and that's something they could put together. We do want to wait on the timing of that to make sure if we're going to put funding towards that Swenson is seriously considering bringing a project forward. And other ideas they've been helping with, I've been attending Chamber of Commerce meetings, and in that they've helped with providing information on things that other communities are doing and that we could think of other projects. So they've also reviewed the study that was done by a different economic development group for the mall when we were trying to create a toolbox a couple of years back, and they went through that study and provided ideas on how we could implement some of the ideas within that.
And then a question, I guess, go back to Jim one. on the CDBG grant, it shows there's still 667,000 carried over for like next year. It shows in a budget with no expense.
Say that again, I'm sorry. With,
I could probably answer that one.
Oh, sorry.
So the CDBG grant, we haven't spent all the money yet for at the Jade Street Park. And so that money will be encumbered into the next year for the final payments for
Oh,
the.
it just didn't show anything in the it just had the total and it didn't have any expenditures. So I was just wondering, and it shows that money for next year too, right?
no, Katie's right. That money's already encumbered. So whatever isn't spent before June 30th will just kind of roll forward. So some of this 3.2 will probably roll into this year.
And then,
if we get a new CDBG grant award, then we would come back, and when council accepts it, then we would plug in the budget at that point.
perfect. And then, thank you, Katie. That was it. And then just one quick one for our public works. You were going to bring back, and maybe I might have missed it, and I apologize, information about the generator. Was that in? Sorry,
Come on.
I'll leave it at that.
We all forgot.
I will say, and I believe I said at the last meeting, that there is no generator at this point at the Public Works Courtyard. I think the question that was previously asked, would it be efficient to have something that's a portable generator that could possibly be used at other sites? I did talk that through with my staff at the yard. Previously, we've rewired the pump station to make it easy down at Long Way to plug in a generator quickly. That same method would not be ideal for the corporation yard. The risk of not having the generator and having the generator placed somewhere else during a storm and the power goes out, where at that point, Public Works staff as first responders is just too great not to have a permanent facility.
So it'll be a permanent generator, and it's allocated in the budget, the 40K, and you think that's enough?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. I have a couple comments at the end. I just want to talk about, but no more questions. Thanks.
I had a question on the generator. Could we use some of the funding from the PG&E grants with solar and generator and the EV stations?
So there's potential grant opportunity to do like a battery backup at the yard. I would say, given the state of the yard generally, that would be something that we should put with a longer term project.
No further questions here. We'll go out to public comment on this item. Anyone that wishes to speak, you're more than welcome to come on up.
So I will note that we have a different timer system.
Oh,
Yes, unfortunately, as we've mentioned, we have an aging facility and the timer has decided to stop working this evening.
Just for me. Hi, my name is Cami Corvin, and I'm a resident of Capitola and business owner here. I don't want to get too much in the weeds because I'm not an expert on your budget situation here, and I will say that you guys did a great job on bringing that up. There's lots of stuff to look at for everybody, and so bless you for that. But I did have some comments on the parking. You know, I kind of feel like we have to be, it's been talked about how we have to be fiscally responsible, we have to be transparent, and that sometimes we need to make some difficult decisions with the budget, and that's going to have to be looked at over the next couple, 3 years because of the possible deficits and things that we're going to be facing. The TOT is like such a great idea, but just the small things that we could look at, and like the parking, for instance, I'm actually in an agreement with raising that to $2.50 to $3. I kind of feel like the village is inexpensive as it is right now. If you were to compare it to other areas of Santa Cruz County, the Wharf, for instance, other areas that tourists will go to. So I really believe that would be a good idea. And then regarding the Christmas break, you know, that's a really tough one. I know people love that because they're like, oh, we can go to the village and it's free and isn't that wonderful? Maybe if we don't take it back, that we could look at maybe you pay half of what it would normally cost for you during that 2-week period. So it's just a suggestion on that. The other thing is, I know you have the surf and coffee pass, which obviously I don't use, because I don't serve. But and then, so there's that, and there's also, like Santa Cruz Wharf has the local pass, right? So you pay so much a year. You know, I kind of feel like we could institute something like that for Capitola residents only, like they would show their driver's license. I'm a member. And so for $100 a year, I get a pass that allows me limited hours, like the Santa Cruz Wharf one does, and maybe increase the surf and coffee one a little bit. Junior guard, maybe increase that a little bit more. Your upper lots being a little bit less than what you would consider prime parking in the village. So I think that those are some of the ways that we could increase. It might help give a little bit more money back to the PD, bringing up those guys also. So I think that's a really great idea. So anyway, just want to throw those suggestions out. Thanks so much, and thanks for all your hard work on the budget. I know it's really difficult.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make comment? Come on down. Welcome.
Hi. Teresa Green. I'm a resident. Let's talk a little bit more about Measure Y. Measure Y ballot language stated to protect essential city services, including public safety and emergency services, repair potholes, maintain streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, beaches, the new wharf, and recreation programs for youth, improve traffic safety, and support local businesses. Voters passed it with 76% approval. The budget document states the city implemented salary adjustments for most of city staff in January 2025 as a result of this tax measure passing to maintain competitive salary ranges. So if you've looked at Anthony Rovi's comments in the agenda, he states the memorandum of agreements list equity adjustments ranging from 1.3% increases up to 14.58 and 16.95% increases for 2 employees. Many employees received raises in 2025. Per the MOU, these raises were contingent on Measure Y passing. So the city management planned to use the funds in this manner. Where is it stated in the measure that funds would go to raises for the staff? So no, these funds are directed into the general fund, and the city uses them however they want. They knew they wanted to use them for raises, but they hid that intent from the voters. I certainly am not opposed to employees getting raises if they earn them. What I object to is the lack of transparency to the voters. How much went to repairs of potholes, streets, etc.? Who knows? The report doesn't say. I would like to see more accounting on how the city allocates these funds. I recommend the council insist on briefings on Measure Y funds at each budget review every year until 2034. This should include expected revenue from the funds, how the funds will be distributed to each of the stated items in the measure, and then report on actual revenue and spending towards these specific items. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? All right. We'll take it back to council for any comments or deliberation. We'll start with Mr. Clark.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions, but a quick comment is that, yeah, we do need to be a little more transparent in some of our spendings, and I think we are learning, and moving forward, I think we'll be able to do that. So.
I know we, mentioned the parking issue, and we're going to do some outreach. So we're not making any definitive decisions today on that, correct? I mean, can we also consider, I know it's 3 hours of free parking. Can we consider maybe 2 hours of free parking and ensuring enforcement happens as an alternative if we don't want to get rid of it completely, as it may impact our tourists and people who are coming to the village for business. I do want to just make a comment that, just yesterday, Lookout article, as well as SF Chronicle recently saying, Santa Cruz County in general has the lowest population growth in the nation. I think second lowest. And the reason why is because the high cost of living and the low wage jobs, right? We aren't paying our staff enough to keep them. And the cost that we spent on Measure Y to increase and bring up our staff to a level that is competitive to the region was an effort to retain them so we don't have turnover. So it was necessary to do. And unfortunately, as explained by our finance director, with the increase in UALs and other funding, other fiscal obligations we are facing really tight budgets for the unforeseen future. So we do have to look at revenue sources, whether that be charging for $20 for the lifeguard, junior guard passes. I agree. I don't think $20 will break a bank of a family, and just would have some more accountability in terms of utilizing our parking. What other? Otherwise, I think I'm fine with the proposed budget, and I would move to accept it and cancel future meetings.
Well, I think that this has been a good budget process. I appreciate all the hard work that the staff has done. Being a member of the Finance Advisory Committee, I think it's only courteous to give them the opportunity to look at the budget. We say in our budget that we consult with them and use them. So they have a meeting next week. So before I would be in favor of, adopting this budget, I think they need the opportunity to look at it, and we need to consider their comments. That's why we have them there. But I do appreciate all of the work that the staff has done on it. There certainly has been a lot of comments about, the staff pay and the staff increases. And I did do a little research, and I will say that Scotts Valley, which is a pretty comparable city, has 65 employees, and they pay about $1 million more a year to those 65 than the 70 people that we have here in Capitola. So I think we've come to a place where we're competitive, but I don't think we've gone overboard on compensating the staff for the jobs they do. Thank you.
One quick thing, for process sake, you can't adopt the budget this evening. Right. We would need direction to prepare the documents for final adoption, and I think there's a potential where you could sort of do both of what Councilmember Arbach and Councilmember Westman suggested, is continue this to a meeting in June, bring in the documents for adoption, bring in the fact recommendation, we'll get a presentation, and we can make any final tweaks if we needed to at that stage. So I think that those are sort of possible to do both potentially.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Can that be our motion? What you just said?
Mr. Jessup, do you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah. Sure do.
I'll second it just so that that's on the record.
So right now we have special meetings scheduled for June 3rd and June 18th that I don't believe that we'll need. So we would cancel those and then bring the budget back at the 11th. We could bring it the 11th and 25th. We could bring it the 11th to review.
Just have the budget coming back on the 11th with the comments from the Finance Advisory Committee and any other
We're moving to cancel the two special
the extra
meetings.
2 meetings.
And then at the 11th, we could get direction to come back at the 25th with the final. So,
Motion and a second to come with the final and the fact recommendation for the 11th. And that hasn't been voted on yet.
Right. Okay.
So a motion and second without any comments yet for myself. So I guess I'll add those in as friendly amendments, or we can, I guess, go from there. Excuse me? Thank you. Let's see, number one would be, I would like to direct the staff, no matter which direction when we go at the end of this, that we send a letter out to our recipients that get grants for us and let them know about what obviously our grants are funded through this next year, but there's a process, and a lot of the organizations that are out there who set budgets up should know about the fiscal constraints that we're under and our projections that are coming out. And so I was wondering if we could, send out a letter to them saying that they're going to be funded out this year, but give a projection on how we're looking in the future on what that looks like, that there could be a potential adjustment in what those look like. At the same time, I also think I would like to encourage staff to reach out to our local bargaining units to make sure that they're aware of where the budget looks like when this process is done, so we can start to over-communicate about, because we look at forecasts and it looks like, with some of the information that was just learned tonight, that the budget looks like a little more promising, but it's still very bleak in 2 years. And so without alarming the bell, but, telling people where we are, because I think on the back of the salaries adjusted and Measure Y and everything, I don't want that to be lost, that's a common practice. We aren't going to have that influx of making those adjustments. So is that something that's possible? Does it have to be a council decision to have those two things as outreach?
The communications with the groups is something that we do just sort of as part of our regular work plan. So that's not communicating with the groups about the budget is not something we need council direction to do. I think if we're going to be writing our nonprofit group partners and sort of providing them with a budget update, I think I would like to hear from the council if that is something the full council would like us to do. I think it would be interpreted differently, and so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Obviously, the process would be that in next year's cycle, the council would determine a budget, staff would issue a NOFA, we would get applications, assign a subcommittee, and make a decision. So I don't know that there's it's up to the council, I think, whether we do anything before then or not.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question? Sure. So are you talking about this last year, we did a 2-year allocation to the nonprofit groups. And looking at next year's budget, based on what our projections are, we should still have a balanced budget meeting that requirement to pay them for the second year. And when we get ready to do notifications to the community groups that they can apply for funding, it seems to me that that's the appropriate time to say, the city's really struggling this year, so we want you to know, when you make your application to apply.
I just want to look at what that time is, because I know some of the groups right now have gotten cut in the middle of their funding cycle, and so there's going to be some big adjustments. And so as much time as we could give them ahead of time for them to adjust programs earlier than if it's just 3 or 4 months in front of it, they might have planned out their programs, and so I'm just trying to over communicate that where we're projecting out our budget looks like in a year or two from now. That was the only thing. It's just the council doesn't feel that's necessary. Well, that's fine too.
Well, I'm just, to be honest, I'm a little confused because we have a lot more groups apply to us for money than we have money to give away every year. And even this last year, a lot of people applied for significantly more money than we were able to allocate to them in their grant. I think the timing should be, several months before we're going to start the application process, letting the groups know where we are, that we're going to have the same amount of funding to allocate, or we're not going to have the same amount of money to allocate.
If you think that's the correct process, I'm fine. I just want to just be noted that, we're just projecting out where it's going. So if that's fine, if the council doesn't feel like that's totally fine.
But I do agree with you. I think that we need to clearly communicate to, almost everyone. Our whole city's based on sales tax right at this point, or TOT tax, hoping to get more of it. And we've been working with them all, but, who knows when they're going to come in or not come in. So at some point, we need to communicate to everybody that our financial future is not 100% secure, because we're dependent on outside developers coming in and doing things to generate revenue for us. At what point we, officially put out that message, I don't know, but
Well, we've had these two lovely budget meetings that are
I think
showing
we
this.
should wait until we're like 6 months out. But I think everybody's aware of the federal government's problems, the state, and then the city. So I think we should wait.
Okay.
We get closer to it.
Perfect. And then my last one is just to advocate for in our budget that we have a line item for Measure Y funding allocated in the budget, and then we make a decision as a council if we're going to fund that line item or if we're not. We have a communication problem, and I'm just trying to come to a common ground on how we can at least let the community know that we know that the goal was to bring our staff up, that everybody has over and over said that that's important, but at the same time that there was a commitment that anything that was left over was going to go to projects. And I would like to see the council thought that we have a line item that's in the budget, and then we'll decide if that number, I think last time we were talking, is $250,000, and then we'll talk about how much of that can be funded. If some of this money is coming in, one-time monies and stuff, can that be a funded, I think it's important for it to stay out there in the forefront with a Measure Y line item, and each council every year can see if they want to fund it or not. So I'd like to see what people think about that.
Yeah, I think the communication is key. Communication is where we would probably not be in this predicament. But having it a line item every year for Measure Y is definitely something we need to do.
Yeah, I think we need to have something in the budget every year that acknowledges Measure Y and says, how much money we got and what the money's being spent on, because it is just, sort of going into the general fund. But, and you're right, communications is key. So we need to have something in the budget every year that sort of talks about Measure Y, just like we talk about other revenue sources we have.
I have no more comments other than if that it would have to be something that would be a friendly amendment to be added, and then I think a discussion, are we going to fund any money this year to that line item, or are we going to hold?
So at this point, there's a motion and a second. It would be up to the motion maker and the seconder if there was a friendly amendment.
I also have comments, so
Oh,
we'll give everybody their fair share.
Right.
So I'm fine with having a line item of Measure Y as transparent as we can be. Let's do it. I think that there's some pros and cons into listing prices for projects and the cost estimates. I don't want to see the city in a position where we've seen us before, where we state it's one thing and then a project comes back and it becomes something else, and it opens a can of worms of lack of transparency or lack of information when it's based on whatever we may be seeing at that moment, and then the project comes down the pike and it's a totally different story. So that would be my only maybe no to that, unless it is very clear that there's a billion asterisks, like that's fine.
You're talking with the CIP, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, for those items. However, like not concrete we could be, I would be fine with that. I think that definitely looking into increasing the parking rates, whether that's a minor adjustment in the back two lots and a little bit more in the village, I'm open. I definitely want to see us explore increasing the TOT tax, whether it's just for short-term rentals, hotels, or both. The junior guard parking pass, absolutely. Could up it $25, $30. They're still gonna buy it. Surf and coffee, I think there's also room there to increase. And then I would like to see possibly, since we kind of already touched on the rec center rentals, I would love to see what this summer brings for you and what feedback you get from people that do rent or feasibility of increasing those prices. I think now that we have this beautiful space, I definitely think you'll be able to squeeze a little more out of people. And I would love to see just an update maybe after the summer season, how that is looking for you and how that's going and with your new staffing. So I don't know if we need a friendly amendment. I didn't understand your last question about.
Well, I'm just, I guess, maybe just clarify, the motion was to cancel future meetings, but I think like the things you just asked for, I talked about in Measure Y, are that going to come back to us in the final draft, and then we'll vote on that? Because I think what the motion, if I heard in the second, was just to cancel future meetings, have that come forward.
Yes, so everything will come back on the regularly scheduled meeting on June 11th.
And then we'll have discussion on if we're going to fund something or we don't want to look at raising parking or more direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that?
So for parking at this point, I've heard from the full council that you'd like to look at raising parking. So we will be talking to the BIA about both holiday parking and village parking, and you will see an item come back to the council kind of with a report back. I'm sure the BIA will be well represented. They will express their opinions as well, and the council can have a conversation, and we would take direction about whether or not we would do that. And so at that point, that's in the work plan. That's something we can continue. Yeah, I think we can come back on June 11th with the FAC recommendation, presentation sort of outlining kind of all the final cleanup items we've been noting this evening, and look to council for adoption. Or you could also continue it that evening as well.
Right. At this point, we don't know what the Finance Advisory Committee is going to do. So if they come back with something that's sort of significant or something we need to talk about more, we can talk about it on the 11th and then go forward.
Okay, great. Would we like to take a roll call?
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Councilmember Orbach,
Aye.
Councilmember Westman, Vice Mayor Jensen,
Aye.
Mayor Morgan.
Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for all the presentations, all the hard work. Thank you, council, for your good feedback. If we don't mind, I would like to take a 3-minute pause. Thank you so much. Be back at 8:20. All right, it's 8:20. Welcome back. Item B. Item B.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. I have 2 more items this evening regarding some of our RTIP funding. The first, that's the wrong presentation. The first of which is regarding the Capitola trestle. Who doesn't love an old picture? 1920s. All right. So the recommended action, we're going to start at the end, is to authorize a request, so to write a letter to the RTC to reprogram some of the funding that we were allocated in the last RTIP, which is a grant program funding round, and use those funds to support preliminary trestle planning work. This would be associated with an MOA with the RTC that will return to council later this year. So if you aren't aware, the trestle is located within Rail Trails segment 11. It is across Soquel Creek. It is fully within the city of Capitola, but owned by the RTC. Currently, the County of Santa Cruz, in conjunction with the RTC, has a project to construct Rail Trail segments 10 and 11, which is a cross-county full trail project, a multi-use trail project. There is a gap in that plan across Soquel Creek without using the trestle at this time. Advancing the planning of reuse of the trestle is a city council goal for fiscal year 26 and 27. If you're not aware, the trestle is actually made up of 5 pieces. The 2 ends are concrete. There are 2 trestle timber bridges. That little timber bridge is right there next to the road that I feel like a lot of people miss often. And then a wrought iron trestle, which is what ends up in a lot of the scenic photos of the city of Capitola. So the proposal is to have this work effort led by the RTC. They have a bridge consultant on retainer. They are Mark Thomas. It would be to do an existing condition review, to look into seismic and structural issues, to do geotechnical work, and really the expected outcomes is to come up with what a reuse project would be. Get those key constraints and get a more firm number on a reuse project. And it really helps the RTC and the city position ourselves for future opportunities to do a project. You may recall that the RTC did do a prior study in 2021 with RealPros, and that was more of a conceptual study. So that really was more of a big picture, can a repurposing project be done? And then this proposed next phase is, what does that work include? And it really gives you more of a funding and fiscal feasibility, where the last study did more of a technical feasibility, more of a concept level estimate versus a planning level estimate. So currently there's $500,000 that we have allocated from the RTIP project for Bay Avenue. Bay Avenue, the project is shrunk substantially based on the last council meeting. And we anticipate being able to use other portions of our TIP fund in a separate funding strategy that is included in your packet at the next item to get to the council goals for that particular corridor. Again, the proposal is to have the RTC administer this project with their consultant. However, city staff would be in participation with this project to support it as it is needed. And so that is the recommended action that was included in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this item.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Clark, any questions?
No questions. I'm going to wait to give my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I do have some questions. Is the RTC's Regional Transportation Infrastructure Program a competitive grant program?
Yes.
How much of the RTIP funding was available last year? You know?
Around $15 million, not all of which the city was eligible for, but many millions of dollars that the city was part of that competitive process.
Do you know how many applicants how many applications were submitted for the RTIP funding?
So every municipality, including the county, and then there's a few metro are eligible to apply. I would say dozens of applications.
I looked it up. It's 26 applications for projects totaling $66 million. How are grants awarded? Do projects have to meet certain criteria? How are they evaluated?
So there's a pretty significant application process that has a lot of criteria, such as, is this some project readiness, PED, access, transit priorities. There's a whole list of priorities. You turn in the application on time. It goes to all of the RTC boards, including the Elderly and Disabled Commission, the Bike Commission, and then the ITAC, which is made up of representatives of all the member agencies. And then those recommendations are made by their staff and given to the RTC, to the commission, for them to do the final allocation of funds.
Great. And I also noticed during the criteria, within the criteria of the application, it also says public engagement. So, and part of that is, was this project identified as a priority from the community? How was it determined to be a priority? Have residents in the project area been involved in the decision-making and project information process to date?
Yes, public outreach and getting public feedback is definitely a criteria of the RTIP program.
But for this particular project, have we done any public outreach? Public engagement?
Not for this project specifically. We have received significant feedback across other projects about this facility, but no, for this project specifically, we have not.
Okay. So based on the information provided in the staff report, it does not appear that the new trestle proposal from city staff would satisfy many of the criteria or provide many of the benefits identified in the grant application. So looking at the trestle project, I have to ask myself, how competitive would an application for the trestle scope of work have been? And the answer is not competitive. Are there other projects in the community or county that are more closely aligned with the goals and evaluation criteria of the RTIP program and could benefit from these funds if we are not going to use them as they have been intended? And the answer is yes, there are lots of projects. And also, if the trestle was a priority for the RTC, why wouldn't they have applied for the funding for themselves? After all, when you look at the 26 applications, they did apply for funding for segments 9, 8, 9, and 10 and 11. So here's my question to you, Director Khan. To your knowledge, have any other jurisdictions that were awarded RTIP grant funding killed their own projects, not because of technical infeasibility or lack of matching funds, but purely for political reasons, and then tried to reallocate the funds to an entirely different project that doesn't meet the original grant criteria?
I don't know. The only thing I could say is projects often don't come to fruition for multiple reasons. But to your question, I am not sure.
Okay. In terms of a project feasibility standpoint, does the RTC even have enough funds to move forward with segments 10 and 11? And if not, why are we even talking about the trestle? The trestle will not provide any countywide access or benefits if there isn't enough funding for those two segments. And we haven't heard an update since the RTC decision to do an about-face about rail last fall, at which time the RTC did not have enough money to construct the trail itself. Do you know when we're going to see the plans for segments 10 and 11 come back to council?
So they've pivoted to the interim trail, which for those of you who aren't following is putting the trail on the tracks. I know that they have to rework some of their environmental evaluation and some of their engineering. So I know that's what they're working through right now. I would anticipate that project coming back to council prior to the end of the calendar year, but that is about as specific as I could give you at this time.
Great, thanks.
Well, it seems like we've gone into sort of making statements rather than questions, but it seems to me that, I think for Santa Cruz County, having a trail that connects all the way through the county is important. And in Capitola, we have Measure L, which says that the trail can't go through Capitola Village, so it's going to need to go across the trestle if we're going to have a continuous trail. And so I think it's important that we start looking at the feasibility of whether or not the trestle actually could be used for bicycle pedestrians going through Capitola. And right now, what we're doing is we're going to ask the RTC if we can reallocate these funds for that project. And so I'm actually in favor of doing that. I think that, Capitola needs to take the lead and find out if we can use the trestle that's in our community as part of this trail thing. And will it work? Will it won't work? We won't know until we do some analysis and find out what kind of condition it's in, how much it would cost to use it. So I would be in favor of going forward with it.
Thank you. Sitting on the RTC is nice to see that there's been some clarification on direction for the intern trail. If we look at the votes that are being voted upon, it's representative of the whole county. And so there's a sense of direction. I do agree with your comment that this is a request from our city to the RTC if the funds can be reallocated. So it's a request, and I think that will be determined at their level. I did have one question for you. In one of your slides, you said that, could you go back to the beginning slide? It says the RTC is leading. There'll be an MOU, if this goes forward, there'll be an MOU, right, that will come forward and work through and I think there's a question of lead or assignment and stuff. That will be worked out between staff level, right, between both the RTC and the city, right?
Yeah, and there would be there'd be an MOA, I think is what we're calling a memorandum of agreement between the RTC and the city about who's different roles. But right now, the RTC, we believe that they would use their staff and use their on-call root trestle engineer. We would help support that process.
I just want to make sure I've seen votes, and they said that Capitola was a lead, and I'm hearing this. I just want to make sure as we go down there, if this is successful and goes forward, that you guys will work out the language on what the word lead means in administrative and using staff or whatever like that, and that'll be handled between you guys.
Yeah, we're working that out.
Okay, that's perfect. I just want to make sure that was. Well, I'm totally in support of this, and it's nice to see a final direction if we could get to the point, because I think there's been this dream for 20 years or maybe longer. Can the trestle be used? And I think that's a common question that should be addressed and asked. And with this in our city, I think we need to show leadership and show how we can connect our whole county together. So I'll leave that, and I won't with just comments right now. So thank you.
I had a question about on the slide. I thought we saw earlier on one of the slides that was one of the city councils. Was part of the city council's goals for 26, 27 was to work on use of the trestle for the ultimate trail. Is that correct?
It's the last bullet point on the slide.
I have no questions. Any public comment? Hi, welcome.
Hi, good evening, council members. I'm Paula Bradley. I'm very disappointed that the council voted against the roundabout at the last meeting. The roundabout was the solution to improve safety and circulation and was well supported by facts as presented in the Bay Avenue corridor study. After 2 years of the residents in the city working towards a solution, the vocal minority rejected the solution. So now it all looks like a 2-year tempest in a teapot, a big waste of time and money, resulting in a couple of Band-Aids applied. The residents who showed up don't want change or a solution. Now, 1 week later, it is proposed to spend our TIP funds awarded for the Bay Avenue traffic and safety improvements for a trestle study for the interim trail. A few years ago, the RTC designated $50,000 for a trestle study, which was instead spent on the interim trail, pushed by Greenway. Now Capitola proposes using their transportation funds for the trestle, which they don't own. Bad enough, you all, pushed by Capitola Greenway, threw away the opportunity for the RTC to fund the superior separated multi-use trail on Park Avenue with their active transportation funds, which would have also saved Capitola many thousands of dollars. Now you all chose to throw away the funding and the opportunity to improve Bay Avenue. Please explain how this all makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, I'll take it back to council. Any other comments or deliberation?
I think I made most of my comments, and I'm happy to make a motion after I hear from everyone else.
I would like to add to that. Yeah, I'm excited. I think this is a good direction. I think it's what the community's been looking for quite some time. But what I would like to do is, as we go forward and approve this, I request that we continue to make mention of our Muni Code 8.72 and Measure L, as we did with our active transportation plan. And other than that, if we can get that put in part of our motion, then I would be happy to also make a motion.
I have some comments. I think it's unfair to both the residents of Capitola and residents of the neighboring jurisdictions to redirect these regional grant funds to a project that was not part of the original grant application, when many other projects in other jurisdictions that actually met the grant criteria were either underfunded or not funded at all. There was no public review or input on this trestle project being proposed tonight, nor was it identified as a priority by our community. This is a key element of a grant criteria. It was also hard to miss the bolded text in the staff report for this item. Quote, advancing preliminary planning for the Capitola trestle is identified as a key city goal for fiscal year 26-27, unquote. I understand that several of my fellow council members identified planning for the trestle, which is not even owned by the city, as their top budget priority. But killing a grant-funded, evidence-based, and publicly vetted roundabout plan that would have improved the safety of our residents in order to achieve that goal is not the way we free up funds. The trestle project has nothing to do with improving safety along Bay Avenue or any other roadway, and it doesn't come close to meeting most of the RTIP grant criteria or providing community benefits RTIP grant funds are intended to provide, so it should not be funded by RTIP funds. I also have to point out that based on the fact that this item was on the agenda one day after the last council meeting's action to kill Bay Avenue, the Bay Avenue corridor project, it appears that last week's decision was orchestrated to free up funds for this trestle project. These efforts were clearly already in the works prior to that decision, and it is extremely disappointing that this information was not shared with the full council and members of the public as part of last week's discussion and decision-making process on the Bay Ave corridor project. Had I known that this was the intent or that this item was going to be tacked on to the budget agenda, I absolutely would have voted no last week. This is why people don't trust the government.
I'd like to respond to that. I take exception that you're thinking that we pre-planned any of this. We didn't even, most of the people on the council had no idea what we were going to vote on last week. So I take exception for you saying that.
I'll second the fact that to have any notion that this was a preconceived effort, that doesn't feel great, especially because that's not true. I think that this is a way to rework something that didn't work, unfortunately. And yeah, that's where I'll put that.
Then I'd like to ask a further question. We voted, my council members next to me voted unanimously last February to move forward with roundabouts. What changed? The data, certainly the data didn't change with the roundabout information. So what has changed? Why did we suddenly vote no to roundabouts?
Well, that was last meeting, which is already passed. So this is just asking to submit a request. That's what we're on right now.
Yeah, I would actually like to thank the staff for coming up with a way to reallocate the money that we had talked about on Bay Avenue to achieve a number of goals in the city that we wouldn't be able to achieve otherwise. I think that this is creative. I think it moves the city forward in lots of different directions, including giving us some money to apply for the community development block grant that's in the next agenda item. I think it's a nice thing to have happened. But for this item, item B, I would like to make a motion that the staff go forward and submit a request to the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission to reprogram up to $200,000 in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program funds currently programmed to the city to support preliminary planning work for the Capitola trestle, which will support Measure L that's in our municipal ordinance, and will hopefully further the fact that someday we may have a trail all the way across Santa Cruz County that can be used by pedestrians and cyclists as a transportation route. So that's my motion.
Thank you. I'd like to second that.
Can I just make one comment too? Just sitting on the RTC again and again, then this year, the RTC voted unanimously funded $1 million towards the EIR study. And again, it's a continuous goal to one day see the possibility of having a rail and trail together. But where it is now, there is no funding at this present time. And so I just want to make sure that as we talk about trail, the ultimate goal, one day, long term, that would be put in front of the voters, will be one day would be rail and trail. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, and I know it doesn't exactly clear, but if we're laying out facts tonight, I think we should make sure those are all on the table and there are not a lot of assumptions made. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Councilmember Orbach,
No.
Councilmember Westman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Jensen,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Aye. Passes 4-1. All right, moving on to item C. Jessica.
This is also related to the RTIP funding that we received this last grant round. So some of the background on leveraging some of these funds for grant opportunities that I had covered in our CIP presentation. The City Council adopted the local road safety plan on the May 14th, 2026 meeting. At that same meeting, we discussed the Bay Avenue corridor and kind of narrowed that project down. In the last item, you just allowed for a request to reallocate our funds to the RTC for doing the trestle. These RTIP funds can be reprogrammed generally, and given the fact that we want to leverage our funds because these are considered local match for particularly federal programs where you cannot match it with other federal funds, this really gives us the ability to use more with the funding that we have. So we went over this a little bit in the CIP, but just to reiterate, there is a potential for a CDBG grant. We've been pretty successful the last few funding rounds to fund our community center and Treasure Cove playground and restrooms with this grant funding opportunity. However, these need to be shovel-ready projects, and they can only be within certain census tracts within the city. Again, those projects can be related to parks and recreation, transportation projects, community facilities, and utilities, which for Capitola means drainage improvements. As discussed, Jade Street and Monterey Park could be potential places to apply for a CDBG project. We have obviously had a lot of CDBG money in the past few years go to Jade Street Park. Monterey Park is not really developed as a $5 million project. So while you can apply for less CDBG funding, it's always nice to be able to leverage the whole amount of funds. One particular project city staff has identified is the Cliffwood Heights neighborhood. So a little more detail, that is one of the eligible zones. And there's been quite a bit of synchronized projects over the years identified that could come together as a really viable CDBG project, including our PMP. All of those orange streets are streets that are in poor condition. CDBG grants can go towards rehabilitating those streets, including some preliminary work we've done with CSSA, which now I don't remember what it stands for, but we had a transportation study done a few years ago that identified sidewalk gaps and some bike and ped improvements related to the middle school, which is also within that Cliffwood Heights neighborhood. The existing sidewalks in that neighborhood also are not currently ADA compliant. One of the proposed uses of our remaining RTIP funds is to use $50,000 towards project development to have a shovel-ready project by the time the CDBG application comes around, which is anticipated to be the end of the year. Again, with CDBG, we are required to have a public hearing to consider other projects, so there is always the potential to apply for a different project. However, it would be wise of us to start a shovel-ready project if we think that this is one that we would want to consider. The other future funding opportunity coming up in the next couple of weeks is SS4A, which is Safe Streets for All, which is a federal safety grant directly linked to our local road safety plan that we adopted. So again, those have to go towards safety projects that were identified in our LSRP, which are all of the yellow dots and lines here. Their funding focus is really corridor safety projects, and then also education programs, and systematic improvements. So systematic improvements means like restriping all the bike lanes in town, putting those yellow back plates on all of the signal lights. That's what we kind of mean by systematic improvements. And then things like lighting improvements and traffic calming are also eligible for this grant. SES is proposing the RTIP use for this to go both to the Bay Avenue project that we are developing in light of our last council meeting, and then potentially a Clare Street improvements pending the corridor plan that Director Herlihy will be presenting next meeting, and then also some systematic safety improvements. So $300,000 in that is left in the Bay Avenue project could support a 20% local match. So for a $1.5 million project. Just to be clear, the SS4A application would include all of these projects, and the money can flow in between projects depending on their final cost of what those projects are. So I do have something drafted that's estimating the value of those projects, but the SS4A grant is all one application for all of those projects. The last one being Bay Avenue. So we do have a federal earmark for this project for $250,000. Again, you can't match federal funds with federal funds, and you have to have a local match for those federal funds. So the last $50,000 that we currently have in our RTIP, we would propose to do to match our funds that in our federal earmark to do that bid block crossing lighting improvements and striping improvements. So the RTIP for Bay Avenue had $500,000 in it. The other RTIP funding we had allocated to us was $100,000 for sidewalk infill. You may recall from the CIP that was presented, our sidewalk infill total need is about $1.4 million. So while this could go towards an infill project, it would be very small, and to use this as leveraging would get us a much larger project, including a sidewalk gap fill in the Cliffwood Heights area. So this summarizes all of the things I said here. I know it's a lot of moving money around and matching this for that. So I'm definitely willing to answer any additional questions you may have. But what the gist is that this is taking about $600,000 and potentially leveraging $6.5 million out of it. So what if we don't get any of this money, which is a real possibility because grants are very competitive. We could still, with the funding we have, do a scaled project of Bay Avenue. Cliffwood Heights, some but not all of the streets are in our annual pavement maintenance program, and we could still resurface the streets per that plan. Really, this strategy lets us use this money as leverage, but if we don't get awarded, there's no money lost, and we can still do the project. Some of the projects we had planned in our CIP. So the recommended action is really long, and I am willing to answer any questions you may have.
In the unlikely event that we don't get the funding, would we still have enough money to do the Center Street crosswalk?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No questions at this time.
Just a clarification, so this is just another request, just like item B, is that correct?
Correct. This would be a request to the RTC to move funds into other projects.
No questions, but just a comment. I look forward to our staff batting 1,000% again, as they continue to do on all this amazing thing you guys do, so thank you.
Couple questions. So I know you said it, but the sidewalk infill, there's that 100,000, but we're looking at like over $1 million worth of work for sidewalk infill. But if we're putting that all together, there's the possibility of utilizing this money as a whole in order to do some sidewalk maintenance. Is that what I understood? Or maybe I'm not saying it right.
So I think the overall goal here is to basically turn around $650,000 into $6.5 million.
Right.
That's the overall goal. And so we have the $100,000 in RTIP funding for sidewalk infill, and we're proposing to reprogram $50,000 to sort of develop the Cliffwood Heights. Basically, it's a safe routes to school, it's drainage improvements, it's a bunch of sidewalks, and it's also street. So it's kind of a more comprehensive program. So at the end of the day, we would end up doing, I don't know, $800,000 worth of sidewalk work.
within that
Yeah.
area. Okay.
That's not a real number, by the way.
No, I understand. That's fine. I
Yeah,
just
so we're leveraging it, but we're using it kind of as the preliminary planning tool to get ourselves to a shovel-ready project so we can.
and that 50,000 would get us to shovel ready. Okay, and then okay, that was my question. And then one more question. I think in that summary slide, I think it's actually the next one, Jessica. Yeah. So I'm wondering if we're able to have some wiggle room within this transfer of funds. I personally would maybe like to see leaving closer to $1 million in the Bay Avenue pocket, maybe taking the Clare Street down to 1.1. I want to be able to make sure that we maintain some funding moving forward. I know we have prioritized lighting, the Center Street crosswalk, and those will be covered. And if council would agree, I would really like to hang on to some money for that area in case there's potential other opportunities for helping to slow traffic or make things safer for bikes and pedestrians. If there's wiggle room in doing that, I would like to explore that, only to make sure we're not completely draining that side of the tank, if that makes sense.
So do you mean not using it to, not potentially putting it up to leverage for grant funding and just keeping it as cash?
I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if, because if, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying I don't want to drain whatever we have for Bay Avenue and allocate it to something else preemptively before, like if we could just swap those numbers. So there's 1 mil left under Bay Ave and 1.1 under Claire's to keep us more heavily with some cash flow for Bay Avenue.
I think I understand.
Okay.
Tell me if I'm not answering your question. So under the LSRP, which have both of those items in it, we can budget, assuming it gets awarded, we can budget those projects however we'd like. Yes. We're not stuck with the estimate that we gave prior to bidding and like fully scoping the project.
We could change the numbers around.
Correct. If we don't get awarded, there is no, if council directs, there is no Claire's project. And then all that $300,000 goes back to Bay Avenue, which is where it sits right now.
Okay.
Anyway.
And otherwise, it's leverage.
We'd initially try to leverage it in the event that we don't get the grant, like we still have the money.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that I don't want to leave Bay Avenue in the dust is all I'm saying. Just putting that out there. Any other questions before we go to public comment? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Feel free to come on up. No takers. All right, we'll bring it back to council. Any deliberation, comments?
Well, I'll start with a comment. I'm grateful and thankful for the staff to be forward-looking on this and all these items. Look forward to see what we can come up with.
Comments?
Yeah, I just want to say truly how impressed I am of you, Director Khan, of how quickly you can pivot and engage and adapt and ensure we leverage the existing grant funding to amplify it by 10 times or more. I do agree with making the improvements in Cliffwood Heights neighborhood. I think designing streets that will promote safety and accessibility, especially to and from New Brighton Middle School, is really important. And I do also appreciate the forward thinking in terms of improvements along Claire's to make it a complete street as a part of the 41st Avenue corridor and allocating funding to that project.
I think that this is a great idea. As I said earlier, I'm impressed with the staff and how they were able to come up with this, and hopefully we can leverage this money and get some more money out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, and so just when I look up there, so that's 5, is that 5 projects? 1, 2, 3, 4 projects now that will be coming out of the from last week's decision that this council made, potentially?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then just one thing, the Claire's, We haven't seen that as a council, correct? And that's only been at planning?
Correct.
And so that community outreach hasn't even happened, correct, around?
Not outside of the corridor study, no.
Okay, so we don't know what that looks like yet. And so this is like just leveraging forward, saying this could be a great opportunity. And I think it might have been seen through planning, the Claire's, right?
And it's going to be presented to council next meeting.
Sure.
Next
So
week, I think.
I guess I was just trying to highlight this is a great opportunity that's moving fast, and you guys are moving on a quick time frame for grants and everything. But the Claire's project, like some other projects, haven't really been vetted out in the community yet, but they all look like they're great ideas.
Just want to clarify that originally it was a 41st Avenue corridor study in which we did public engagement and had a public engagement meeting at New Brighton. Following that, when we expanded it to Claire's and Capitola Road, we again did public engagement and stakeholder meetings. So there has been quite a bit of public engagement, and we continue to message the public. But yes, next week will be the first time it'll come before the City Council. It has been reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We received all direction needed. Is there, I don't know if there's a motion that we need to make.
There is a staff recommendation. It's long. You can see it on the screen. Someone could make a motion to approve the recommendation on the screen.
I move the recommended action.
I'll second it.
Great, we have a motion and a second. We have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Councilmember Orbach,
Aye.
Councilmember Westman,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Jensen,
Aye.
and Mayor Morgan.
Aye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this special budget evening. Item 6, adjournment. Take care of yourself and others.